The sun had barely cleared the ridgeline when Claire Dawson stepped out of the cold morning air and into the narrow hallway of the ranger station. Her shift had run through the night, a routine patrol that ended with frost clinging to her jacket and the metallic taste of fatigue on her tongue. The corridor smelled of pine resin and old coffee, the floorboards creaking beneath her boots as she moved with the deliberate quiet of someone accustomed to making herself invisible. A note pinned to the bulletin board caught her eye, her name written across it in neat controlled letters. Supervisor Cole wants to see you. She stood still for a moment, feeling an echo from the past stirring at the edge of her thoughts. Folding the paper into her pocket, she walked down the corridor toward Cole's office at the far end of the station. The door stood ajar, light spilling onto scuffed floorboards. Inside, the air smelled faintly of disinfectant. Too clean, almost sterile. His office was arranged with an order that felt unnatural in a place like this. Maps covering the walls with corners tacked down in precise symmetry. The desk bore only a computer monitor lamp and files squared neatly in the corner. No trace of the fieldwork that defined everyone else's days. Cole looked up as she entered, a man in his late 40s with hair trimmed short and a uniform crisp in a way that suggested more time spent ironing than wearing it in the field. His gesture toward the chair opposite his desk was friendly, almost warm. "Come in. Have a seat." Claire remained standing, her boots planted firmly, spine straight, as if at attention, a habit she couldn't break even years after leaving military life. She inclined her head in acknowledgement, but offered no words. Cole studied her the way a man might study a chessboard, eyes flicking over her expression, posture, and silence, as though taking inventory. After a pause, he folded his hands. "There's a road out in El Cencio Grove, remote stretch, haven't had anyone out there in months. I want you to give it a sweep." The name sparked a memory, dense timber winding gullies, ridges that swallowed radio signals. She wondered why Cole had chosen her, and why alone when protocol favored sending pairs into terrain like that. Cole tapped the desk. "It's nothing urgent. Probably nothing at all, but a few unusual reports came in. Signs of logging, maybe hunters straying off course. Just take a look." After a long silence, Claire gave a short nod. "Understood." His lips curved into a smile that didn't touch his eyes. "Good. I knew I could rely on you." As she turned to leave, she felt his gaze linger, sharp and measuring like a hook dragged across her spine. From behind her, Cole slid a folded map across the polished surface. "One more thing. Take this with you. It's the latest update." Claire halted, reaching for it, and examined it under the light. Though it resembled the usual topographical chart, something was wrong. Red slashes crossed one-quadrant arrows drawn where no standard legend placed them. A trail she knew curved north was marked running east. A clearing she'd patrolled weeks ago appeared shaded over as if non-existent. She tapped the paper with her gloved finger. "These symbols. Since when are they on our maps?" Cole's reply came too quickly. "Trail erosion, rock slides in the spring. I asked the tech office to adjust things." Her eyes lifted from the page to his face, his smile too smooth. She folded the map, tucked it beneath her arm, and said nothing more. But as she stepped out, she slid her other hand into her pocket, fingers brushing her own personal map carefully marked from months of patrols. She would bring both into the field, one official, one real. If there was a difference, she would know. The hallway seemed colder as she walked past colleagues beginning their morning duties, boots thumping on stairs, radios chirping laughter near the coffee pot. Inside her chest, a familiar sensation coiled. The warning hum of instincts that once kept her alive in another desert, another war. She remembered ambushes beginning just like this. Orders that looked ordinary but smelled wrong. A patrol down the wrong valley. A map with one misplaced ridgeline. A superior officer insisting everything was routine. In Afghanistan, suspicion had been survival. Here in Wyoming, it might be the same. Her discipline pressed against her doubts. Orders were orders. She would follow through, but she would not go blind. In her quarters, a narrow room lined with shelves, Claire began checking her gear with military precision. The M4 carbine first. Pull the charging handle, inspect the chamber. Feel the clean slide of metal on metal. Her Glock 19 next, checking sights in action before sliding it back onto her belt. From a pack sheath, she drew her survival knife, testing the edge against her thumb before returning it to its boot slot. She methodically verified everything. Canteens, ration bars, Satellite radio, GPS tracker, spare batteries, both maps. Old habits demanded this thoroughness. Old ghosts insisted on it. Her eyes landed on the small steel locker's bottom drawer. Inside lay the box she'd promised never to touch again, a metal pinned to velvet dull under the low light. For a long second, faces of her team flickered through her mind, along with gunfire and the betrayal that ripped them apart. She shut the drawer hard. Never again, not by my carelessness. By the time she wheeled her ATV from the garage, first sunlight had crested the treetops. The sky above the Tetons burned pale gold snowcaps glowing like fresh forged iron. Cold wind carried the sharp scent of pine needles and damp soil as she loaded her pack and rifle onto the vehicle. For a moment, she sat with the engine idling, scanning the station yard. Her colleagues moved about checking tires, loading supplies, sharing coffee. No one paid her more than a passing glance, just another ranger heading out on patrol. Nothing unusual except the unease settling like stone in her chest. She twisted the throttle. The machine growled down the dirt track, trees closing in quickly as the station vanished behind. The forest pressed close on either side, shadows stretching across the trail. Leaves crackled under her tires with each turn of the wheels. Her eyes swept the undergrowth restlessly. The weight of her gear pressed against her back, rifle cold under her hand. Every sense heightened as the trail bent west into El Cencio Grove, where Cole's map had drawn its strange red slashes. This is no routine patrol. The forest grew denser as Claire penetrated deeper into El Cencio Grove. Sunlight fractured through layers of pine and fir as her ATV's tires chewed across damp soil, the trail narrowing to little more than a deer path. After an hour, she cut the motor and let silence settle. Dismounting with rifle slung across her shoulder, she discovered the remnants of a camp. Trampled earth revealing a collapsed tent outline, half buried under needles, a torn tarp flapping in the wind, stones blackened by ash in a ring, and rusted food tins kicked aside. She picked one up to smell it. The sour tang of beans and grease clung faintly. Not weeks old, but days. Rising slowly, she scanned the perimeter and noticed a tree with fresh scars, bark hacked away in irregular chunks, unlike the careful notches of rangers or hikers. Someone had been cutting wood hastily, illegal logging. Crouching again, she ran a gloved hand across the ground, finding boot prints from 3 or 4 men, impressions sharp enough to be less than 24 hours old and all, angling deeper into the grove. Claire photographed everything. Prints, hacked, tree abandoned camp. Each click of the shutter marking evidence to be filed later if she lived to file it. Cole's voice echoed in her mind, El Cencio Grove's quiet. Hardly anyone goes out there. The trail told a different story. The forest tone had changed. Morning birds had fallen silent, an unnatural hush pressing down like a lid. Even the wind faltered, branches barely stirring. Claire rose, every nerve alert, turning in a slow arc. Instinct whispered she was being watched, the hair on her neck prickling as it hadn't since Afghanistan. Her hand moved to the Glock at her hip, loosening it in its holster. Her stance shifted into the balanced posture drilled in combat zones as memories edged into awareness. The silence before firefights, desert air, holding its breath before ambushes detonated. The same dread throbbed now in Wyoming's wilderness. Don't repeat the mistake, she told herself. Don't walk into it blind. But the trees grew too close, sightlines reduced to yards. Every shadow might hide a man, every wind gust mask a footstep. Her breath slowed, ears straining for movement. The attack came without warning. As Claire inspected a heel mark in the soil, sudden rustling exploded from the brush. 3 men burst from cover, wearing mixed camouflage and faded jackets, faces wrapped in scarves, revealing only eyes. One carried heavy wood, another a short-barreled pistol, the third a jagged knife. Claire reacted instinctively, yanking her Glock free and firing into the air. The crack startled a crow from the treetops and momentarily froze the attackers. But a 4th figure lunged from behind, hurling a fist-sized stone that struck her shoulder, numbing her arm. The Glock clattered into the dirt. She spun, driving her elbow backward with all her strength. It connected with a masked jaw. Something crunched, and the man reeled away, clutching his face. The others surged forward. One slammed a wooden club against her forearm, while another tackled her from the side. She grappled fiercely, soldiers' training taking over. Knee to ribs, sharp kick to shin, body moving with muscle memory. For a breathless second, she might break free, But more men emerged from the forest, teeth bared in cruel grins. Outnumbered 6-1, a heavy blow cracked against her skull. White light burst in her vision as she fought to stay upright, but her knees buckled. Through ringing ears, she heard Spanish words harsh and mocking, alive. Take her alive. She's just another dog of the Rangers. Darkness crowded her senses as plastic zip ties cinched her wrists. Rough hands stripped away her weapons, tossing them into underbrush. A boot slammed onto her chest, pinning her to the ground. She gasped, ribs straining, dirt filling her lungs. Fists rained down on her face, a kick to her ribs, spiraling pain through her side. Still she glared upward, defiance burning through the haze. The man above snarled, loud eyes, too loud. The leader appeared taller than the rest, cold eyes above his bandana. He crouched, inspecting her face with detached calculation. Her bloodied lip curled into a smirk, despite the pain enraging him. He barked orders, tie her, hang her, let the sun and wolves finish the job. They dragged her across the forest floor to a clearing where an old mesquite tree spread twisted branches like a skeletal hand. Someone threw a coarse rope over a thick limb, looping it around her ankle until bone ground against fiber. With a heave, they hauled her upward. The world inverted, blood rushing to her head as she swung a few feet off the ground. The leader tugged the knot, satisfied, and spat into the dirt. Let her wait. One man tossed her M4 into the underbrush with a mocking whistle. See how long the brave ranger lasts. Their laughter grated as they vanished into the trees. Boots crunching fainter until silence swallowed the clearing. The rope dug cruelly into her ankles as Claire twisted, trying to fold upward, but the knot held fast. Pain knifed through her joints. Her fingers clawed at air, desperate for anything to cut herself free. But all weapons were gone. She swung helplessly, motion scraping her shoulders against bark. Sweat and blood from her scalp stung her eyes. Her vision blurred, the world tilting with every sway. Her lungs worked desperately, each breath burning like fire. The heat pressed down mercilessly, her mouth parched, tongue thick and useless. She closed her eyes and ghosts appeared. Shouts in Pashto, rifle cracks, IED blast, faces of her unit in the instant before death. Not again, not like this. But the forest offered no answer. For the first time in years, a chilling thought formed. Maybe this time I won't make it out. Time unraveled as minutes bled into hours. The sun climbed higher, her skin prickling, lips cracking. Blood pooled in her head until visions swam in red and black. Her breath became shallow, the rope's creak growing louder with each sway. Leaves rustled above, sharp against raw nerves. Her chest heaved, then faltered. Consciousness wavered like an ebbing tide. In the dim blur before blackness closed in, her last thought flickered. No one's coming. Not this time. Everything went dark. The world returned slowly like light through torn cloth. Claire's mouth felt like sand tongue swollen against the roof. Each breath hurt her chest, heaving in shallow gasps. Her eyes fluttered open to blurred shapes and colors. The sun had risen higher, heat pressing against her skin. Blood throbbed in her skull from hanging upside down, ears ringing with a low drone. She groaned, the sound barely escaping cracked lips. Movement flickered at the edge of her vision. She tried turning her head, but pain knifed through her neck. The world spun dizzyingly, forcing her eyes shut. When she looked again, a shadow slipped between trees. Large, silent, black. Her mind reeled. Hallucination. Dehydration, heat stroke, oxygen, deprivation. All painting ghosts behind her eyes. A ghost. The shadow moved again, a massive shape gliding between sunlight shafts. Her heart thudded painfully. She blinked, but the figure remained. Too solid for imagination. A horse. Her vision sharpened as the figure stepped from the trees, the forest seemingly drawing back to make space. A stallion unlike any she'd seen. Enormous coat so black it swallowed light dark sheen, rippling over muscle with each silent step. Its mane hung long in wild strands, glinting silver in sunlight. On its left shoulder, a long, pale scar parted the hair, marking some past battle. Claire had glimpsed wild Mustangs before, fleeting shadows at patrol edges, elusive and wary of humans. They never approached. They bolted at human scent. But this one stood barely 12 feet away, head high, nostrils flaring. Its eyes, dark, bottomless, locked onto her with an intensity that jolted through her spine. No, this can't be real. The stallion's ears flicked at overhead leaves before returning attentions to her. It didn't flee or shy away, but watched with eerie stillness. Then it began moving, slow, deliberate steps, pressing into dead leaves with weighty thuds circling the tree, once then twice its rhythm, steady as a drumbeat. Claire's body tensed involuntarily. Even in delirium, she recognized the danger of a Mustang's kick. Yet its movements weren't aggressive, but calculated, curious. It lowered its massive head, expanding nostrils to draw her, scent ears swiveling in constant alertness. She held her breath unconsciously as if exhaling might spook it. Her heart hammered as the stallion continued circling its movements uncanny. No panic, no hesitation, almost understanding the situation before it. It's just an animal, she told herself unconvincingly. The stallion stopped beneath her head, lifting eyes narrowing on the binding rope. Its hot breath rushed against her leg through her boot. Claire stared, pulse racing like a snare drum. "No, you can't," she whispered, words barely carrying beyond her lips. The horse tilted its head, lips curling back as it nosed the hemp. It snorted once, then clamped teeth around the rope. Claire froze. Fibers creaked under powerful jaws, then groaned with a dry, splintering sound. Her body jerked as the line shifted, swinging violently. A cry tore from her throat. The stallion braced muscles bunching under its coat and tugged again. The rope sang with tension. With a sharp crack, the knot gave way. Claire plummeted, hitting the ground hard. The impact knocked air from her lungs as pain flared across shoulder, hip, and bruised ribs. The world exploded in stars of white and black. She couldn't breathe, body curling instinctively for oxygen. Finally, she gasped, air rasping down her raw throat. The ankle agony was blinding, where rope had burned deep, each blood throb bringing fresh pain. She tried rolling to her side, but barely lifted herself. Flat on the dirt, vision swimming, she became aware of the stallion standing over her, close enough to hear its steady breathing. Earth and musk filled her nostrils as its chest rose and fell, steam drifting from nostrils in the afternoon heat. It hadn't run. It had saved her. Claire's mind reeled. Nothing about this made sense. All her years in combat zones had taught her to rely on training and reason. Nothing happened without cause. Soldiers acted from duty, enemies from hatred, civilians from desperation. Logic always existed, even buried in cruelty. But this, a wild Mustang choosing to approach a dangling, bleeding ranger and free her, defied explanation. Tears stung her eyes. She hated the weakness, but truth clawed its way out anyway. In Afghanistan, no miracle had come. No shadow pulled her men from the trap. They died where they fell. She lived by accident. Now half a world away, when death seemed certain, again deliverance appeared on four legs. You saved me," she whispered, voice breaking in dryness. The horse shifted its weight, gaze never leaving her. She tried pushing herself up, but her arms shook violently before collapsing. The stallion stepped closer, hooves pressing soil inches from her arm. Claire raised her head with effort. Their eyes met, its darker than night, yet burning steady and unwavering. No fear, no cruelty, just presence. The forest seemed to fall away, silence deepening around them. For a moment only, soldier and Mustang existed, survivor and shadow. "You saved me," she whispered again. Her strength vanished. Her head fell back against dirt as darkness surged. The last thing she saw was the stallion standing guard, tall and immovable, like a sentinel carved from the wild itself. Night had fallen over El Cencio Grove when Claire regained consciousness. The canopy had disappeared into blackness, pierced only by scattered stars and the swollen moon. Pain throbbed everywhere, ribs like splintered glass, ankle pulsing with each heartbeat, head heavy as stone. She lay sprawled where she'd fallen, half buried in leaves, every muscle screaming at attempted movement. The forest sounds had changed, insects buzzing steadily, distant wolves howling hungrily through the night air. Fear crept into her veins, colder than pain. She tried sitting up, but her arms collapsed beneath her. Her legs shook violently, ankles swollen, and useless ribs stabbing with each breath. She clenched her jaw against crying out, knowing sound might bring back her attackers. The wolves cried closer. Claire scanned the darkness and saw 2 points of light in the shadows, moonlight reflecting from eyes. For a heartbeat, she thought wolves had found her. Then the shape emerged, stopping her pulse in disbelief. The stallion stood nearby, its body rimmed with silver moonlight, shoulder-scarred, pale against obsidian, coat eyes glowing like coals, watching with the same intensity as before. Claire tried speaking, producing only a rasp. The great horse stepped forward, hooves sinking softly into damp soil with deep measured sounds. Her breath trembled as her mind struggled accepting what her eyes witnessed. No Mustang would approach a broken human. Yet this one not only approached, it lowered itself. The stallion bent its knees, massive frame folding until its chest nearly touched earth. Dust rose in a faint cloud. Its mane spilled forward like black silk curtains brushing the ground. It turned slightly, one ear angled toward her, as though inviting. Claire stared, frozen between disbelief and awe. The movement was unmistakably intentional. "You want me to ride," she whispered. The horse exhaled sharply, steam flaring from nostrils in the night chill. Claire fought tears. Every body part screamed against moving, but staying meant death by wolves or returning cartel men. Slowly, painfully, she dragged herself forward, dirt scraping her palms raw. Each arm pull made her ribs ache. Each inch gained a small battle. She gasped for air, sweat chilling against her skin. Despite the cold, the stallion remained still, head lowered patiently. She reached for its main fingers, trembling as they closed around coarse strands, thick dust rough, but radiating warmth like banked embers. She pulled arms, shaking violently, shoulders threatening to give way. Her first attempt slipped, chest hitting the horse's side, pain jolting through ribs. She sagged back, dizzy. Not yet. Not done. She gathered remaining strength, teeth clenched until her jaw ached. She hauled upward, gripping tighter. Her feet scrabbled against ground, sliding on loose soil. Her clothing tore against horsehide. On the third try, her body tipped over the stallion's broad back, collapsing across warm muscle arms draped limply to each side. She could barely breathe, but had made it. Her cheek pressed into the mane, its scent of earth, sweat, and wildness filling her lungs. The stallion rose in one smooth motion, muscles rippling beneath her like living steel. For a heartbeat, she feared sliding off, but it adjusted its weight with uncanny balance, steadying her limp form before moving with unhurried, yet purposeful steps, each hoof reverberating through her chest. The rhythm became hypnotic, carrying her deeper into night. The trail narrowed through stone rocks, jutting like broken teeth, glistening under moonlight. The stallion threaded between them, unerringly, each step precise and sure. They passed through a narrow gorge, walls rising steeply, moonlight slicing down in pale ribbons. Beyond it, a stream gurgled high and cold. The stallion waded in water, splashing against Claire's dangling boots. The cold shock seeped into her skin, partially waking her from delirium. For a moment, she imagined another place. Mountains, half a world away, men shouting, crossing a river under fire. But here only the steady breathing of her carrier accompanied her. Each time the stallion leapt obstacles or climbed slopes, she thought she would slip, but it never lost balance, carrying her as if practiced 1,000 times. Half-conscious, Claire surrendered to the rhythm, floating between wakefulness and dreams. She pressed against its neck, mane damp with sweat and dew, its body heat chasing away cold. She heard its heart thundering, steady and sure, her own heartbeat gradually matching it, falling into cadence with hooves striking earth. Her mind drifted, night blurring with memory. Afghanistan again, rotor blades hammering dust, whipping her face, explosions blooming, distant team cries filling her ears. Then the scene shifted. Gunfire replaced by steady hoofbeats, chaos by the silent strength beneath her. For the first time in years, amidst pain and exhaustion, she felt a sliver of safety. The realization startled and comforted her simultaneously. She hadn't felt safe since before the ambush, but now, half dead on a wild Mustang's back, she allowed herself to believe it. The moon climbed high, silvering the forest. Fog pooled in hollows, dew gathering on pine needles like glass beads. Temperature dropped sharply. Claire shivering violently, teeth chattering. Still, the stallion maintained its relentless stride, carrying her forward as if toward a chosen destination. Wolves rose again, closer. Claire stiffened against the horse's back, but it merely tossed its head and quickened pace. Its hooves hammered harder, a thunderous warning carrying across the valley. The wolves fell silent. Claire felt a tremor of laughter rise. Weak, broken, but real. "Not afraid of anything, are you?" The stallion's ears flicked as if understanding. By horizon-paling time, she was barely conscious, slumped against the horse's neck, fingers tangled in its mane. Through exhaustion's fog, she glimpsed faint lights ahead. Not celestial bodies, but lamps. The station. The stallion crested a low rise and paused, standing tall. Below in the trees, the ranger station flickered with emergency lamps, dawn brushing rooftops with gray. Claire lifted her head weakly. We made it back. Her voice broke as consciousness slipped away. The stallion stood motionless as if confirming his sight was real breath, streaming white plumes before deliberately moving forward through thinning trees. At the forest edge where gravel began, the horse halted. Claire had gone completely limp against its neck. The stallion stood with head raised, eyes fixed on the human outpost, steam drifting from its nostrils as dawn broke. Then with deliberate steps, it walked into the clearing, bringing Claire Dawson back to the living. First light crept across the valley as the motion sensor by the north tree line began flashing. Inside Bridger Teton Station, a small monitor displayed a blinking dot moving steadily across the feed. Agent Sofia Ramirez rubbed tired eyes and leaned closer. Initially thinking it was wildlife, she noticed the readings were wrong, too steady and deliberate for random animal movement. Not a deer, she murmured to herself. Practical and unsentimental by reputation, Sophia rarely spooked. But watching the dot approach the boundary, she felt prickling skin. The movement seemed almost purposeful. She grabbed her radio unit 3, suited up. We've got something unusual on the north line. We're going out. Minutes later, she led 3 rangers through the mist rifles slung in flashlights, cutting pale cones through darkness. The forest remained hushed, last stars fading as dawn pressed over ridges. Sophia's boots crunched against gravel near the tree line. The mist broke open. They froze. Emerging from drifting fog came a colossal Mustang coal-black with tangled wild mane, moving with strange gravity as if the forest bent to its stride. A pale scar slashed across its shoulder, silvery in morning light. But what held them motionless was its burden. Slumped across its back lay a ranger jacket, torn and stained pale hands dangling lifelessly, face slack with exhaustion, lips cracked and bloodied. Christ almighty, one younger ranger whispered. It's carrying her. Sophia recognized Claire Dawson instantly. For a heartbeat, nobody moved the image too surreal. A wild stallion delivering their comrade through dawn mist. Quiet Sophia hissed, signaling them to hold. Cautiously stepping forward, easy now. The Mustang's ears twitched, great head, lowering dark eyes unblinking. Then it did something that caught Sophia's breath. It bowed slightly, lowering its neck until Claire's body slid within reach. Not fleeing, not resisting. Offering. They rushed forward. 2 rangers carefully lifted Claire onto a stretcher. Her chest rose and fell, faintly skin-clammy lips split with dehydration. She's alive, Sophia breathed relief, weakening her knees. Get her inside. Now. They moved quickly toward the infirmary. Sophia lingered briefly, glancing back at the Mustang standing motionless outside the fence. Massive head lifted, watching. Steam rose in the crisp air, obsidian eyes following every step as Claire disappeared inside. One man muttered, "It's guarding her." Sophia couldn't answer, words failing her. The infirmary erupted into activity. Dr. Hale immediately inserted an IV saline, dripping steadily as bandages wrapped Claire's raw wrists and bruised ribs. The room filled with antiseptic smell. Claire stirred once, lips moving silently. She's badly dehydrated, Dr. Hale noted. She's lucky she made it back at all. Outside beyond the fence, the Mustang remained unmoved. Steam curled from its nostrils like a sentinel's breath. By nightfall, rain fell in thin sheets against the glass. The stallion shook once, scattering droplets, then resumed its vigil. Hours passed. Rangers whispered. The Mustang hadn't left. By midnight, whispers named it the guardian horse. Through the next day, Claire drifted between consciousness and fever dreams. Rope-burning ankles, inverted world spinning, rope snapping, and always the black stallion. When fully awake days later, she blinked at the white ceiling. The antiseptic smell, muffled voices, monitor beeping confirmed her survival. Every part ached, but her mind remained sharp. She remembered everything. Being left today, suffocating heat, the shadow from the trees, the impossible rescue rope breaking the steady rhythm of hooves through night. Turning toward the window, she saw him still standing by the fence, mud-streaked legs, shoulder scar, pale against dark coat eyes fixed on the station. It didn't leave me, she whispered, a tear escaping before she could stop it. As emotion welled, suspicion followed. She remembered why she'd been in El Cencio Grove. Cole's voice, the strange map, the patrol order sending her alone. Her hand clenched the bedsheet. This hadn't been chance. 2 mornings later, propped against her pillow with color returning, she demanded her mission folder. Sophia hesitated before retrieving it. "You should rest. I need to see it," Claire insisted flatly. Opening the folder, she scanned the orders. Her eyes froze on the signature. Her name scrolled across the bottom, but not in her handwriting. The loops were wrong. The D curve wasn't hers. She pressed her lips together, heart hammering, as she examined the map. Red lines altered trails. She knew every ridge and stream in El Cencio Grove. Those marks were deliberately wrong. She exhaled sharply through her mouth, fury rising. Someone wanted me dead. That evening, Sophia found Claire sitting upright with falsified orders spread across the blanket. "You see it too?" Claire asked without preamble. Sophia's dark eyes scanned the papers before she exhaled slowly. "I thought so when we brought you in." "That was no accident." Claire searched her face. "Then you believe me. I saw that horse carry you from the forest, Dawson. If that's real, everything else is on the table. Someone inside this station set you up, and we're finding out who." For the first time in years, Claire felt the fragile spark of trust take root. Together, they began investigating. Sophia pulled access logs from the station system, quickly finding the digital footprint of someone logged into the map database at midnight 2 nights before Claire's patrol. Edits had been made under a secondary account linked to the supervisor's office. Randall Cole. The timestamp aligned exactly with when her orders were issued. They discreetly questioned staff. One ranger admitted seeing Cole leaving his office late after everyone had gone. Another mentioned overhearing a Spanish phone call, clipped and angry, that stopped when Cole realized he wasn't alone. Piece by piece, the picture formed. Forged signature, altered map, isolated patrol order. All pointing to him. Claire gripped the paper's fingers, digging into edges until knuckles whitened. "Not this time. Not this. I won't let betrayal walk away again." The night grew thick with heat, a storm brewing. Inside the station, air hung heavy, fans working lazily, lights buzzing against darkness. Claire lay restless in the infirmary, wounds raw, but mind refusing sleep. Something in her chest tightened, as if the world held its breath. Without warning, the station went black, every light dying simultaneously. Fans stopped. Servers and communications fell silent. For a heartbeat, darkness felt absolute, swallowing walls and corridors. Claire bolted upright despite pain screaming through her ribs. Power's been cut. The backup generator should have engaged, but seconds stretched into silence. No machinery whirred, no emergency lights flickered. The bedside radio emitted only static, sterile hiss of dead air. Footsteps pounded down the hallway. Sophia burst in, sidearm drawn, face taut in thin flashlight beam. This isn't a malfunction. Someone's killed the power. All of it. Claire swung her legs off the cot, teeth gritted against pain. Then it's not just a blackout. It's the opening move. Confirmation came seconds later. A metallic groan from outside as the front gate rattled under impact. Dogs barked furiously before snarling desperately. A gunshot cracked the night. A ranger's shout cut short into silence. Sophia's jaw clenched. She glanced at Claire. No words necessary. Claire yanked open the emergency locker, pulling a Kevlar vest over hospital scrubs despite ribs screaming in protest. She seized a Glock 19 from the rack, chambered around check sights with steady fingers. 3 rangers rushed in with rifles, eyes wide. Sophia issued calm but urgent orders. "We hold the evidence room." That's what they're after. Everyone understood. The falsified map forged orders, proof of inside orchestration. If those files disappeared, truth vanished with them. The attack intensified. AK-47 staccato rattling against thin defenses, shotgun blasts rolling like thunder across the yard. Only flashlight sweeps and muzzle flares pierced the darkness. Claire crouched behind sandbags near the main entrance, Glock steady. Her heart pounded not from fear, but combat's electric thrill. Adrenaline-numbed pain focusing every nerve. Muzzle flashes erupted from the tree line as bullets hammered barricades, spraying splinters and dust. She returned fire in precise, controlled bursts. A figure crumpled. Another staggered back into darkness. Beside her, Sophia fired from cover. They cannot reach that room. A cry rang out behind them. A ranger slumping, clutching his blood-soaked shoulder. Claire slid across the floor without hesitation, dragging him behind cover, despite agony tearing through her side. Pressing his hand over the wound, "Stay with me." She snatched her Glock and resumed firing in the same breath, driving attackers back into brush. The fight descended into chaos. Shouts, gunfire, ricochet, sparks lighting darkness like fireflies. Claire's focus remained razor-sharp, honed by memories of other firefights in distant lands. Different setting, different uniforms, but survival's rhythm unchanged. Then the ground shook with an inhuman sound. A piercing scream splitting the night, a stallion's cry wild and furious. Every head turned. From shadows at the yard's edge, a colossal shape thundered forward. Ash! His coat gleamed with firelight from muzzle blasts, eyes burning ferally. The horse slammed into a shotgun-wielding gunman impact, flinging the man against the fence with a sickening crunch. Another cartel fighter raised his rifle, but before aiming, Ash wheeled with devastating force. His kick connected with a second attacker, dropping him like a rag doll. The yard momentarily froze in disbelief. The impossible had charged into battle. Monstro, one cartel man screamed. "Kill it!" Muzzles swung toward the horse, but Ash vanished into shadow hooves, drumming like thunder, impossible to target. Claire's chest tightened, watching. The wild stallion had chosen sides. Inside, fighting intensified. A side door burst open as armed men flooded the hallway, boots slamming against floor flashlights, cutting jagged beams through darkness. Claire and Sophia pivoted, guns blazing. Bullets shattered plaster and tore chunks from walls as the corridor filled with acrid smoke, visibility reduced to sparks and muzzle flashes. A shotgun blast peppered Claire's arm with shrapnel. She staggered but fired back, dropping the doorway gunman. Pain lanced through her, but adrenaline maintained her focus. Another attacker lunged toward the evidence room. Claire caught him in a light strobe rifle raised. Her trigger squeeze drilled him squarely in the chest. He collapsed against the door frame, sliding down lifelessly. Her ears rang with combat noise. For a fleeting instant, the scene blurred with memory. A burning Afghan compound, her team's shoulder-to-shoulder night alive with fire. The same desperation, the same resolve to hold the line. This time no one would be betrayed into silence. The battle reached a lull. Smoke drifted thickly down the corridor. For a moment, gunfire ceased. Then a voice cut through the haze, low, cold, familiar. "Drop your weapons. It's over." Claire's breath hitched. A light beam swept across the hall, illuminating a figure stepping forward in tactical gear, black as midnight rifle gripped with authority. The face behind the flashlight needed no introduction. Randall Cole. He wore no ranger uniform now. His expression twisted with rage, polite mask gone. His eyes locked venomously on Claire. "You should have died out there in the grove." Claire's heart hammered, not from shock but rage burning away pain. She rose, gun steady, exhaustion forgotten. Sophia's voice rang sharply behind her. "You bastard! You set her up!" Cole's lips curled into a sneer. "You still don't get it. Those men outside pay 10 times what this pathetic government ever will. I didn't choose wrong. I chose the winning side." Claire's voice lowered, each word steel-edged. The winning side doesn't sell out their own. The winning side doesn't bury its people for profit. For a moment, the hall shrank to just them, soldier and traitor, predator and prey. The moment shattered as another wave of cartel fighters stormed in. Gunfire erupted anew, deafening in the narrow space. Claire and Sophia dove for cover, returning fire relentlessly. Plaster rained from the ceiling as smoke thickened. Screams rose and died. A grenade clinked against the floor. Instinct screamed. Claire shoved Sophia down as the explosion ripped through the corridor, smoke billowing in choking waves. Visibility vanished completely. Shadows darted through fog, muzzle flashes tearing holes in the haze. The hallway became smoke fire and screaming metal. Claire pressed against the wall, Glock raised, lungs burning with each breath. Ahead, Cole's rifle spat again, muzzle flashes stabbing through smoke. Bullets ripped into plaster, one slamming into the wall near Sophia's face, another embedding in the doorframe, a third screaming toward her chest. Sophia barely ducked in time, the blast scorching air above her head. Her wide eyes reflected dim light. She couldn't avoid the next shot. Then came the scream, a stallion's cry, raw and furious, shaking walls, reverberating through smoke-choked air. From the corridor side, through a shattered window in dust plume, Ash exploded into the fight. His massive body filled the hall, black as Shadow's shoulder scar. Gleaming silver, for an instant he embodied mythic force. The gunshot cracked. The bullet slammed into Ash's flank, impact shuddering through the hall like steel hammer. The stallion lurched hindquarters, momentarily collapsing, his scream tearing from his throat. Yet he remained standing, planted firmly between Cole and those he protected. Time froze. Everyone fell silent at the sight, cartel and ranger alike. Smoke curled around the animal's body, blood soaking down his leg. His chest heaved, eyes burning defiantly. A wild horse had taken a bullet meant for humans. Claire's feral roar tore from her chest. She lunged, ignoring tearing rib pain and muscle weakness. Adrenaline consumed her, sharpening to single-bladed fury. Cole raised his rifle, but she struck first, slamming her arm against the weapon, wrenching it sideways. The shot blasted a ceiling hole. They locked together, Claire crashing into him, fists and elbows flying. He had height and weight advantage, rage lending strength. But Claire fought with nothing to lose, desperation. Her knee drove into his gut, elbow smashing his jaw. His wild hook grazed her cheekbone without slowing her. Afghanistan memories surged. Close quarters chaos, fighting for life in dirt. She had survived that. She would not die to betrayal again. Cole snarled during their grapple. "You should have stayed down, Dawson." She snarled back, twisting his arm until the rifle clattered away. She slammed him against the wall, forearm against his throat. His face reddened, gasping for air. His knee nearly broke her grip, but she pivoted, hooking his leg and shoving backward. They crashed to the floor, with Claire pinning him, fist clamped around his wrist. She wrenched the last weapon from his hand. Cole thrashed, spitting curses, but Sophia appeared with steady hands despite limb tremors. She snapped handcuffs onto his wrists with a metallic clink echoing like judgment. Claire knelt on his back, pressing him floorward. "You sold us out. You sent me into that trap, and now you tried to kill me again." Cole twisted, sneering through bloody teeth. "You were nothing but a pawn. Expendable. Just like your friends overseas." The words sliced deep without making Claire flinch. Her glare remained steel. Sophia leaned close, voice icy. "No, Cole. You'll stand trial. The state will hear every word of what you've done." The cuffs clicked into place, final and absolute. But the hall had quieted for another reason. Every gaze turned toward the stallion. Ash trembled, breathing labored, legs staggering beneath him. Slowly, as if every bone resisted, he sank to his knees. Blood poured from his flank wound, darkening his gleaming coat. "No," Claire whispered, horror seizing her chest. She shoved Cole aside and sprinted across the floor, falling to her knees beside Ash. Her arms wrapped around his thick neck, fingers tangling in his mane. Warm, coarse, already blood-sticky. "Stay with me," she begged, voice breaking. "Please don't leave me. You already saved me once. Don't make me lose you now." Ash's chest rose raggedly. His eyes rolled dark and infinite, but when finding hers, something flickered within. Recognition. He knew her. Her tears fell onto his coat, streaking down the black sheen. She pressed her forehead against him. "You've already given me more than anyone had the right to. Just please, please hold on." The stallion's ear twitched faintly at her voice. Sophia's urgent radio call cut through. "We need the veterinary team now. Critical. Bring the kit. He's going down fast." Claire barely registered the team scrambling, barking into comms, running for supplies. All she felt was the shuddering rise and fall of the horse's chest beneath her hands. Every groan rumbling from his body chilled her marrow. Not just animal sound, but something ancient and wild, refusing surrender. A ranger whispered nearby, "I've never seen anything like this. A wild horse fighting like a soldier." The words echoed unheeded. Claire pressed her cheek into the stallion's mane, her voice becoming desperate promises. "You're not dying here. Not after everything. You hear me? Not here." Tires screeched outside as a rescue vehicle halted, lights flashing. Back doors burst open. Veterinarians and techs spilling out with equipment, crates rushing inside to stop before the bleeding Mustang. "Move," the lead doctor barked. "Clear space." Claire refused, releasing him until a medic gently touched her shoulder. "We need to work." She nodded, hands trembling violently as she loosened her grip but stayed close, never leaving Ash's sightline. The vets worked rapidly, injecting painkillers, applying pressure bandages, sliding IV lines into thick veins. Blood stained their gloves, sleeves, and floor. Claire knelt beside the horse's head, whispering constantly, "Fight. Just fight a little longer." Ash's ear twitched at her voice. His eyes rolled, but never left her, even as sedation dulled their brightness. The vet looked grim, but determined. "If we can get him to mobile surgery, he has a chance. The bullet might have missed vital organs, but we need to move now." Claire's throat closed as she forced herself to nod. "Then go do it." Word spread by dawn. A ranger had photographed the chaos. Claire kneeling in the smoke-filled corridor, cradling the massive black stallion streaked with blood. The image reached local channels before sunrise. By noon, Cheyenne news outlets ran headlines, "Wild Mustang saves Ranger from cartel attack." "Legend of the Black Horse, bullet taken to protect human life." The photos swept across social media faster than the written story. Some called it unbelievable, others miraculous. Comment threads filled with awe, skepticism, reverence. By evening, national outlets picked it up. "The Black Shadow of El Cencio Grove," one paper dubbed him. The story resonated. Wild freedom choosing to shield humans against armed men, something pure amid violence. Claire's name surfaced too, the survivor twice over. Interviews speculated about her military past and bond with the Mustang. But Claire ignored the noise, focused solely on whether Ash would survive the night. Dawn bled across the Tetons as a damp chill settled over the ranger station. The atmosphere of the previous night's siege clung to the walls, cordite and antiseptic mingling in the corridors, boot prints pressed into dried mud, yellow evidence markers dotting the courtyard where blood had soaked into gravel. Federal agents in dark jackets moved through the scene like ravens, collecting shell casings and cataloging bullet holes with mechanical precision. Sofia Ramirez stood at the edge of the surgical tent they'd erected near the barn, steam rising from the coffee mug clutched in her hand. Her uniform bore the rumpled evidence of a sleepless night, dark circles shadowing her eyes. The makeshift operating theater had been working through the pre-dawn hours, the veterinary team laboring to save the stallion that had turned the tide of battle. Claire's absence from the recovery room had surprised no one. She'd refused treatment for her own wounds until the horse was stable, stationing herself outside the surgical tent, a sentinel mirroring the vigil Ash had kept for her days earlier. The symmetry wasn't lost on the other rangers, who gave her space with the respectful distance afforded to grief. The surgical tent flap opened. Dr. Martinez stepped out, surgical mask dangling around his neck, eyes heavy with fatigue. Blood stained the front of his scrubs in an abstract pattern, hands raw from repeated scrubbing. His approach toward Claire carried the weight of professional detachment, warring with personal investment. "We got the bullet. Missed the vital organs by millimeters. He's lost blood, but he's strong. The next 24 hours will tell." Claire's face remained unreadable, a discipline honed in combat zones where displaying emotion could prove fatal. Only the slight tremor in her hands betrayed the maelstrom beneath the surface. "When can I see him?" The vet gestured toward the tent. "Now, if you want. Just, he's heavily sedated. Don't expect much." Inside, the air hung thick with antiseptic and the metallic tang of blood. Surgical lamps cast harsh islands of light in the canvas darkness. Ash lay on his side flank, rising and falling in shallow, labored breaths. Tubes snaked from his leg, carrying fluids and medication. The bandage wrapping his wound bloomed with a crimson stain at its center, bright against his midnight coat. Claire approached slowly, mindful of the medical equipment. The stallion's eyes remained closed, long lashes casting shadows on his cheek. She knelt beside his massive head, reaching out with a tentative hand to touch his neck. His coat felt cooler than before, the vital heat diminished by trauma and blood loss. A dam broke inside of her. The discipline that had carried her through the firefight crumbled as her hand rested on his pulse. Her voice emerged as a whisper, private even in the empty tent. "You had no reason to come back. No reason to fight. The wild doesn't owe debts." His ear twitched slightly, the barest acknowledgement that somewhere beneath the sedation he heard her. It was enough. Claire settled onto the ground beside him, her back against a support pole, hand never leaving his neck. That's how Sophia found her an hour later, asleep in exhaustion, fingers still tangled in the stallion's mane as if anchoring him to life. 2 days passed in a haze of debriefings and medical treatments. Federal agents swarmed the station, interrogating rangers and gathering evidence from the attack. Claire answered their questions with mechanical precision, describing Cole's betrayal, the falsified orders, the ambush, and the impossible rescue with the detached clarity of a field report. Only when they questioned the stallion's behavior did her voice falter, lacking language to explain something that defied explanation. How does a wild animal choose sides in a human conflict? One agent asked Penn, hovering over his notepad. Claire met his gaze steadily. Some things don't translate to reports. She returned to the surgical tent after each interview, resuming her vigil as if pulled by gravity. By the second evening, Ash had begun to stir, his massive body shifting with growing awareness. Dr. Martinez adjusted his medication, balancing pain management against consciousness. He's fighting the sedation harder than I expected, the vet noted, checking vital signs. Most horses would still be under. He seems determined to wake up. He doesn't trust unconsciousness, Claire replied. Neither do I. That night, with agents finally departed and the station quieter, Claire brought her sleeping bag to the tent. She couldn't explain her certainty that her presence mattered, only that she felt it like a physical tether. The few times she'd left for interviews, Ash's vital signs had destabilized, improving only when she returned. The medical staff had noticed the pattern without comment, adjusting their schedules to accommodate her presence. Near midnight, Claire jolted awake from a half-doze. Something had changed in the tense atmosphere. Ash's eyes were open, reflecting the dim emergency light in obsidian pools. They fixed on her with unmistakable recognition, alert despite the pain medication flowing through his system. She moved closer, careful not to disturb the medical equipment. His ears tracked her movement, head lifting slightly from the padding. "Hey, fighter," she whispered, throat tight. "You scared everyone." A soft exhale from his nostrils warmed her hand, deliberate acknowledgement. Claire's chest constricted with an emotion she couldn't name, something beyond gratitude, deeper than relief. She'd seen men die for less than what he'd given, witnessed courage in desperate battles, but never encountered anything like this willful choice from a creature who owed humanity nothing. "You shouldn't exist," she told him, fingers gently stroking his forelock. "Not like this, not making the choices you make." Dr. Martinez found them that way at dawn check-in. Claire sleeping beside the stallion's head, his muzzle resting against her shoulder, both breathing in synchronized rhythm. The vet paused in the tent entrance, struck by the tableau's impossible intimacy. In 20 years of veterinary practice, he'd never witnessed such a connection between human and wild equine. His scientific mind searched for explanations, imprinting, conditioning, anomalous neurological wiring, but found no satisfactory answer. "He's healing faster than I've ever seen," Martinez told Sophia later that morning, reviewing charts in the station's makeshift command center. "Almost like he's willing himself better. I'd call it impossible if I hadn't seen it myself." Sophia sorted through incident reports, dark circles under her eyes betraying her own exhaustion. Seems we're dealing in impossibilities lately. The medical staff moved Ash to a temporary paddock 3 days after surgery, rigging a shelter with canvas walls to protect against the mountain weather. Claire helped them transfer him, walking alongside the gurney, her hand resting on his shoulder. The stallion remained unnaturally calm during the process, his eyes never leaving her face despite the discomfort of movement. With a more stable environment established, Claire finally allowed the station medic to properly treat her own injuries. The rope burns on her ankles, cracked ribs from the cartel beating, lacerations and bruising that mapped the attack in vivid colors across her skin. She submitted to the examination with military stoicism, answering questions about pain levels with the detachment of someone long accustomed to compartmentalizing physical discomfort. "You should be in a hospital," the medic told her, wrapping her ribs with practiced efficiency. "These injuries aren't minor." Claire's response was dismissive. "Hospitals ask questions I don't want to answer." She returned to the paddock afterward, finding Ash standing for the first time since surgery. His legs trembled slightly with the effort, but his posture held the same regal quality she'd witnessed in the forest. The wound at his flank had been redressed, white bandages stark against his dark coat. He turned his head as she approached, acknowledging her presence with a soft, nickering sound. "Progress," she said, voice warm with approval. "The trembling will pass." For the next week, Claire split her time between the paddock and assisting the investigation. The evidence against Cole mounted daily. Financial records revealed substantial deposits coinciding with cartel shipment, schedules, phone logs connected him to known traffickers, and testimonies from captured attackers confirmed his role in coordinating forest access routes. The case expanded beyond Bridger Teton, linking to similar operations in 3 neighboring forests, all using federal land for drug movement and illegal resource extraction. Claire felt a hollow satisfaction as each piece fell into place. Justice would come, but it wouldn't undo the betrayal or heal the scars it had left. Some mornings, waking beside Ash's paddock, she found herself reaching for weapons that weren't there, phantom threats lurking at the edge of consciousness. The hypervigilance she'd developed in Afghanistan, temporarily buried in the routine of ranger work, had resurfaced with renewed intensity. Sophia noticed the signs, recognizing them from her own years in law enforcement. She found Claire at the paddock one evening, methodically checking the perimeter fencing for weaknesses, movements precise and focused in the gathering dusk. "When's the last time you slept more than 2 hours?" Sophia asked, leaning against the fence post. Claire continued her inspection without pausing. "Sleep's overrated. So is collapsing from exhaustion. The horse is healing. Maybe you should try it too." Something in Sophia's tone, concern without pity, penetrated Claire's defenses. Her hands stilled on the fence wire, shoulders dropping a fraction. "I keep seeing it happen again. Cole, the cartel, Ash taking that bullet. When I close my eyes, it all plays on repeat." Sophia's silence held understanding rather than judgment. Her eventual response carried the weight of personal experience. Trauma has a way of burning itself into replay. "But you can't stand guard forever." "Watch me," Claire replied, but the edge in her voice had softened. That night, thunder rolled across the Tetons, lightning illuminating the peaks in stark white flashes. Rain pelted the station in heavy sheets, turning the yard to mud. Claire had insisted on staying in the paddock shelter despite Sophia's objections, unwilling to leave him. Ash exposed to the elements in his weakened state. The canvas walls snapped in the wind, rain finding its way through seams to form puddles on the dirt floor. Ash grew increasingly agitated as the storm intensified, ears flattening at each thunderclap. His breathing quickened, nostrils flaring, muscles tensing beneath the sleek coat. Claire recognized the reaction. Not simple animal fear of storms, but something deeper. The lightning flashes, the explosive sound of thunder, the adrenaline spike, all mirroring combat conditions. The stallion was experiencing something remarkably similar to the hypervigilance that plagued her own sleep. She moved closer, speaking in low, steady tones. "It's okay. Just noise. We're safe here." His eyes rolled toward her, whites showing around the edges. His chest heaved with quickened breath. Claire made a decision that contradicted every protocol for handling injured wild animals. She approached slowly, hands visible, and sat beside him on the ground. Then carefully she leaned against his side, her head resting against his shoulder. The contact was electric, warmth radiating between them, his heartbeat thundering against her ear. For a moment he stiffened, millennia of wild instinct warring with something newer. Then gradually his breathing slowed to match hers. The trembling in his muscles subsided. As the storm raged around them, they remained connected in shared vigilance, two survivors recognizing in each other a mirror of their own wounds. Morning broke with fragile clarity, the storm leaving behind washed skies and the scent of ozone. Claire woke stiff and sore, still leaning against Ash's warmth. The stallion stood in exactly the same position, as if he'd remained motionless all night to avoid disturbing her. Their eyes met in the dawn light, an understanding passing between them that transcended the barriers of species. "You kept watch," she realized, "while I slept." The thought should have seemed absurd, attributing human motivation to animal behavior. Yet as Ash lowered his head to gently nudge her shoulder, the gesture felt unmistakably intentional. Not the random movement of a creature operating on instinct, but a deliberate communication from one sentinel to another. The day brought an unexpected visitor to Bridger Teton. A sleek government SUV navigated the muddy access road, parking with precision in the small lot. The woman who emerged wore a tailored pantsuit that seemed wildly out of place among the ranger uniforms and tactical gear that had dominated the station for the past week. Her identification badge identified her as Catherine Mercer, Department of Interior, Office of Inspector General. Sophia intercepted her before she could reach the main building. "We weren't expecting additional federal oversight. The FBI has primary jurisdiction." Mercer's smile remained professional as she produced a folder of authorization documents. "This case has implications beyond criminal prosecution. I'm here to assess the structural vulnerabilities that allowed this situation to develop." My focus is systemic, not individual. What does that mean for us? Sophia's wariness showed in her stance, body angled between Mercer and the path to the station. It means I need to interview your personnel, review your protocols, and make recommendations to prevent recurrence. Mercer's gaze traveled past Sophia, landing on the paddock where Claire was visible attending to Ash. Is that the Mustang I've heard about? Her interest sent a warning flare through Sophia's instincts. News of the horse's extraordinary behavior had spread through government channels, generating bureaucratic attention neither ranger had anticipated. Yes, he's recovering from a gunshot wound sustained during the attack. Fascinating. I'd like to speak with Ranger Dawson about him as well. She's still recovering herself. Sophia's protective instincts surged to the surface. Maybe tomorrow. Mercer's expression cooled several degrees. My schedule is rather tight. I'm sure she can manage a few questions today. The interview took place in the small conference room windows overlooking the paddock. Claire sat with military rigidity, hands flat on the table, eyes tracking Mercer's movements with the constant assessment of someone calculating threat levels. The inspector had arranged her materials with meticulous precision, recorder notepad personnel files including Claire's military service record. Mercer began with standard questions about the night of the attack. Cole's behavior, the evidence trail. Claire answered with economy of language, offering facts without elaboration. Only when the questions turned to Ash did her composure flicker. What's your explanation for the Mustang's behavior? Mercer asked, pen poised above her notepad. Wild horses typically avoid humans, yet this one not only rescued you, but returned to defend the station. That's unprecedented. Claire met her gaze directly. I don't have an explanation. Surely you have a theory, Mercer pressed, leaning forward slightly. Animal behaviorists will want to study this case. It could represent an evolutionary anomaly, or perhaps indicate previous human contact that altered its response patterns. He has a name, Claire's voice hardened. Not it. And he's not a lab specimen. Mercer's pen stilled. I understand you've developed an attachment. That's natural given the circumstances. But this animal represents a significant scientific opportunity. The department is considering options for continued observation in a controlled setting. The temperature in the room seemed to drop 10 degrees. Claire's expression didn't change, but something dangerous flickered behind her eyes. You want to cage him, controlled setting, Mercer corrected. For research purposes, his behavior could provide insights into wild equine cognition that might benefit conservation efforts. Surely you can see the value in that. Claire stood the movement so sudden that Mercer flinched involuntarily. Interview's over. I don't think you understand the scope of federal interest here, Ranger Dawson. Mercer's voice hardened. This isn't a request. Claire leaned forward, palms flat on the table, voice dropping to a near whisper. And I don't think you understand what you're dealing with. That horse chose freedom every day of his life until he chose to help me. I won't let you take that choice from him. She left without waiting for a response, the door closing with controlled precision behind her. Sophia, waiting in the hallway, recognized the expression on Claire's face, the same cold focus she'd worn during the firefight with Cole's men. How bad? Sophia asked quietly. They want to take him, study him. Claire's hands curled into fists at her sides. Like he's government property because he saved a government employee. Sophia processed this with a frown. They can't just seize a wild Mustang without cause. There are protocols, endangered species considerations. Since when has bureaucracy let that stop them? Claire's jaw tightened. We need to move him, get him somewhere they can't reach. Slow down, Sophia cautioned. Let's not do anything rash. Let me make some calls, see what legal grounds they're standing on. The Mustang Protection Act might give us leverage. Claire's expression didn't soften. Make your calls, but I'm not letting them take him. She headed straight for the paddock pulse hammering in her temples. Ash sensed her agitation immediately, head rising from where he'd been dozing in the afternoon sun. He approached the fence as she entered, nostrils flaring, to catch her scent eyes alert to the change in her demeanor. They want to cage you, she told him, resting her forehead against his neck. Study you like some specimen because you didn't behave the way they think wild things should. His ear flicked against her cheek, breath warm on her shoulder. Claire found herself speaking to him as she would a human comrade, without filtering or simplifying her thoughts. I owe you my life twice over. I won't let them repay that by taking your freedom. Ash shifted, pressing his muzzle gently against her arm in what felt remarkably like reassurance. The gesture steadied her, bringing clarity to the chaos of her thoughts. She needed a plan, not just reaction. Somewhere in the tangle of bureaucracy and jurisdiction, there had to be a solution that preserved his freedom while acknowledging what he'd done. That evening, Claire found Sophia in the communications office, phone pressed to her ear, expression grim. She hung up as Claire entered, shaking her head slightly. They're invoking special research provisions under wildlife management statutes. Mercer already has the transport authorization. They're planning to move him to a federal facility in Colorado tomorrow morning. Transport authorization requires a veterinary clearance, Claire pointed out. He's still recovering from a gunshot wound. Sophia sighed. They have arranged for their own vet to perform the evaluation tonight. Someone who'll give them exactly the answer they want. We need to evacuate him. Claire's decision solidified into certainty tonight before their vet arrives. And go where Sophia countered. He's still healing. He needs medical supervision, shelter from the elements. You can't just release him into the wild in his condition. Claire's mind raced through options, discarding each as quickly as they formed. The federal government's reach extended throughout the region. Any official facility would be subject to their authority. Private land might offer temporary refuge, but finding someone willing to harbor a horse against federal orders presented its own challenges. Then a memory surfaced, something Dr. Martinez had mentioned during one of Ash's treatment sessions. A conservation easement in the northern section of the forest managed jointly by the Forest Service and the Shoshone tribe. The area fell under partial tribal jurisdiction, creating a legal gray zone that might buy them time. The Whitewater Basin, Claire said suddenly. The conservation area. It's within his natural range but has shelter structures from the Wildlife Monitoring Program. And the jurisdictional overlap might slow down Mercer's paperwork. Sophia considered this, brow furrowed. It's remote, limited vehicle access. We'd need to transport him at least part way by trailer, then go overland for the final stretch. Can you get us a trailer without raising flags? Claire asked. Something unmarked, nothing tied to the station. Probably. My cousin runs a horse rescue outside of Jackson. She owes me a favor. Sophia hesitated, the full implications settling over her. You understand what you're asking me to do? Interfering with a federal directive is career suicide for both of us. Claire met her gaze steadily. I'm not asking you to do anything. This is my choice. If anyone takes the fall, it's me. That's not how partnership works, Dawson. Sophia's eyes hardened with resolve. If we do this, we do it together. But I need to know you've thought this through. All the way through. I've been thinking about little else since he came for me in that forest, Claire replied, certainty threading through her voice. Some debts can't be repaid, but they still have to be honored. As night fell, Sophia left to retrieve the trailer while Claire prepared Ash for transport. The paddock buzzed with covert activity, rangers loyal to Sophia creating diversions to keep Mercer's attention focused elsewhere. Dr. Martinez quietly packing medical supplies for the journey while maintaining plausible deniability about their destination. Claire worked methodically, checking Ash's wound dressing and preparing the minimal equipment they'd need. Emergency medical kit, satellite phone, enough supplies to establish a temporary camp in the basin. The stallion watched her preparations with alert interest, seeming to understand the urgency behind her movements. Footsteps approached the paddock. Too heavy for Sophia, too deliberate for the medical staff. Claire tensed hand, instinctively moving to where her sidearm would normally rest. Mercer appeared at the gate, silhouetted against the security lights, expression unreadable in the shadows. Planning a late-night therapy session. Ranger Dawson. Her tone carried false lightness, or perhaps something more substantial. Just checking his dressings before bed, Claire replied, forcing casualness into her voice. The night cold aggravates the wound. Mercer stepped closer, eyes scanning the packed supplies with professional assessment. Quite extensive medical kit for a dressing change. Almost looks like field gear for an extended deployment. The atmosphere between them crackled with unspoken challenge. Claire straightened, abandoning the pretense. You can't have him. This isn't personal, Ranger. Mercer's tone softened marginally. I understand your attachment, but this is about something larger. This animal has demonstrated behavioral patterns that could revolutionize our understanding of wild equine cognition. The research potential alone, he's not research material. Claire cut her off, stepping between Mercer and the paddock gate. He's a living being who's earned the right to choose his own path. Noble sentiment, Mercer acknowledged with a tight smile, but ultimately irrelevant to the legal reality. My team arrives at 0600 to facilitate transport. I suggest you use the intervening hours to make your peace with the situation. She turned to leave, then paused, glancing back over her shoulder. For what it's worth, I do understand what he means to you. But some things are bigger than personal debts, Ranger Dawson. Even debts of life. Claire watched her retreat toward the main building, calculation replacing anger. Mercer's visit had compressed their timeline. The transport team would arrive in less than 8 hours. They needed to move now, regardless of whether Sophia had secured the trailer. As if summoned by the thought, headlights appeared on the access road, cutting through the darkness. A mud-spattered pickup truck pulled a modest horse trailer, navigating carefully across the uneven ground. Sophia killed the engine before reaching the main yard, approaching the paddock on foot. We've got maybe 2 hours before someone notices that trailer shouldn't be here, she reported in a hushed voice. Martinez is creating a diversion, called Mercer, about a concerning development in Ash's blood work that requires her immediate attention. Claire nodded, already opening the paddock gate. Let's move. Leading Ash to the trailer presented a challenge neither had fully considered. Wild Mustangs typically fight loading, requiring extensive training to accept the confined space. Claire had no halter, no lead rope, nothing but the connection they'd forged through mutual survival. She stood before him, palm extended. I need you to trust me one more time. For a long moment, Ash remained motionless, dark eyes reflecting the security lights. Then with deliberate grace, he stepped forward, following her open hand toward the waiting trailer. At the ramp, he hesitated, nostrils flaring at the unfamiliar enclosure. Claire placed a hand gently on his shoulder, feeling the tension rippling beneath his skin. Just for a little while, she promised. Then freedom. With a soft exhale that seemed almost like resignation, Ash walked up the ramp. The trailer rocked slightly under his weight, metal creaking in protest. Claire secured the partition with hands that refused to tremble, hyper-aware that every second increased their risk of discovery. Sophia slid into the driver's seat, starting the engine with a muted rumble. Go, Claire urged, swinging into the passenger side. South Access Road. Less visibility. They pulled away from the station lights off, relying on moonlight to navigate the initial stretch. Claire watched the side mirror, tension coiling in her spine as they passed the main gate. No alarm sounded, no shouts followed them. The darkness swallowed the trailer as they turned onto the forest access road, leaving behind the pool of security lights. For 15 minutes, they drove in tense silence, the radio scanner crackling occasionally with routine communications from the station. Nothing indicated their departure had been noticed. Claire began to breathe easier as they navigated deeper into the forest, putting distance between themselves and Mercer's authority. Then the scanner burst to life, Mercer's voice tight with controlled fury. Security alert. Unauthorized removal of federal evidence. All personnel on standby. Ranger Dawson has taken the Mustang. Sophia cursed under her breath, accelerating slightly. So much for our head start. How did she know so quickly? Claire scanned the darkness behind them, half expecting to see pursuit lights cresting the hill. Tracker, Sophia replied grimly. Martinez found one on the medical equipment when he was packing supplies. Must have been a backup we missed. Claire processed this with cold efficiency, military training asserting itself. How far to the trailhead? 4 miles by road. Then we go overland. Sophia checked the rearview mirror. No sign of headlights yet. They'll have to organize transport alert roadblocks. That buys us maybe 30 minutes. The truck lurched over uneven terrain, suspension protesting as Sophia pushed it faster than the forest road warranted. In the trailer, metal fixtures rattled with each impact. Claire twisted in her seat, peering through the small window into the trailer. Ash stood braced against the movement in ears, alert to the changing conditions, but showing none of the panic typical of wild horses in transport. We need to ditch the trailer before we hit the main road, Claire decided. They'll be watching the intersections. Sophia nodded toward an upcoming turnoff, old fire break about half a mile ahead. Narrow, but it connects to the North Trail system. We can reach the basin that way, but it'll mean Ash has to travel under his own power sooner than we planned. His wound, Claire considered the risks. Martinez said no strenuous activity for at least another week. Versus capture and confinement, Sophia's question hung in the air between them. The decision made itself. Claire readied her gear as Sophia turned onto the fire break, a barely visible gap between towering pines. The truck slowed to a crawl, branches scraping against the windows as the path narrowed. Finally, they reached a small clearing, barely large enough to maneuver the trailer. This is it, Sophia cut the engine. Any further and we risk getting stuck. They worked quickly in the moonlight, unloading essential supplies and preparing Ash for the journey ahead. Claire checked his wound dressing one final time, noting with relief that the exertion hadn't reopened the injury. The stallion seemed to understand the urgency, standing patiently despite the unusual activity around him. Sophia consulted her GPS, orienting herself against the surrounding peaks basins about 4 miles north-northwest. Mostly uphill, some rough terrain. In daylight, it's a 3-hour hike. At night, with an injured horse. We'll manage. Claire shouldered her pack, adjusting the weight distribution to minimize strain on her healing ribs. You should head back before they realize you're involved. Sophia's expression hardened. Not a chance. I'm seeing this through. You have a career to protect, Claire argued. A pension, 20 years of service. There's no reason both of us should go down for this. There's every reason, Sophia countered, checking her own pack straps with practiced efficiency. Besides, you think I'm letting you navigate these trails alone at night? You'd end up in Montana by morning. The unexpected humor broke the tension momentarily. Claire felt a smile tug at her lips, despite the circumstances. Your orienteering scores weren't exactly stellar either. Ramirez, the camaraderie steadied her as they began their trek, Ash following closely behind. The forest closed around them, dense and protective moonlight filtering through the canopy in dappled patterns across the trail. Claire found herself slipping into patrol mode. Senses, heightened attention divided between the path ahead and the stallion's condition, constantly assessing and adjusting their pace to accommodate his healing wound. An hour into their journey, the radio crackled to life on Sophia's belt. She adjusted the volume head, tilted to catch the transmission. All units on alert. Suspects believed heading north on Forest Service trails. Approach with caution. Ranger Dawson potentially armed. Armed and dangerous, Claire muttered darkly. Like I'm some kind of fugitive. In their eyes, you are, Sophia replied, scanning the ridgeline ahead. You stole federal property. He was never their property to begin with. They paused at a stream crossing to rest and allow Ash to drink. The stallion moved with careful deliberation, favoring his injured side but showing remarkable endurance for an animal still recovering from a critical wound. Claire checked his breathing and pulse, relieved to find both within acceptable ranges despite the exertion. The moon had begun its descent when they reached the steepest section of the trail. Loose shale made footing treacherous, forcing them to zigzag across the slope rather than tackling it directly. Ash navigated the terrain with innate sure-footedness, choosing his path with a precision that suggested intimate familiarity with mountain conditions. He knows these mountains, Sophia observed, watching the stallion pick his way across a particularly challenging stretch. This is his territory. Claire nodded, a realization forming. We're not just running to any safe haven. We're taking him home. The first hint of dawn illuminated the eastern sky as they crested the final ridge. Below them stretched Whitewater Basin, a natural amphitheater of alpine meadow surrounded by protective slopes, a stream cutting through its center before disappearing into a stand of aspen. The conservation structures were visible near the western edge. Simple wooden shelters constructed for wildlife observation, abandoned during winter months, but still structurally sound. They made their way down the gentler slope into the basin, fatigue setting into their muscles after the night-long trek. Ash's stride had shortened, his head hanging lower than earlier, clear signs that the journey had taxed his recovering strength. Still, there was something in his posture as they entered the meadow, a relaxing of his shoulders, a deepening of his breathing, that suggested recognition. He's been here before, Claire noted, watching him scan the perimeter with familiar ease. This is part of his range. They established camp in the largest of the observation structures, a simple cabin with a covered porch and attached lean-to that could serve as sheltered space for Ash. Sophia secured the perimeter while Claire prepared a treatment area, laying out the medical supplies Martinez had provided for continued wound care. The stallion allowed her to check his injury without protest, standing patiently as she removed the bandage to assess for bleeding or infection. The wound looked remarkably clean, given their journey, the edges already showing signs of healthy healing. Claire applied fresh antiseptic and rebandaged the area with practiced movements. You should rest, she told him, stroking his neck gently. You've earned it. As if understanding her words, Ash lowered himself carefully to the ground in the sheltered area of the lean-to, legs folding beneath him with cautious precision. He exhaled deeply, eyes half closing in the first signs of genuine relaxation since the shooting. Claire joined Sophia on the cabin porch, accepting a cup of instant coffee from the small camp stove. Dawn had fully broken, bathing the basin in golden light that caught the dew on meadow grasses. From their elevated position, they could see for miles across the surrounding forest the ranger station hidden beyond several ridgelines. "They'll be searching by helicopter soon," Sophia said, blowing steam from her cup. "The tree cover will hide us for now, but we should move deeper into the aspens before they start aerial sweeps." Claire nodded, mapping contingencies in her mind. The basin has cave systems on the north face, natural shelters difficult to spot from the air. We can relocate there if necessary. "How long do you plan to stay up here?" Sophia asked the question they'd both avoided during their flight. Claire watched the sunlight playing across the meadow, calculating resources against necessity, long enough for his wound to heal completely. 2 weeks, maybe 3. After that, he makes his own choice. And if he chooses to stay with you, the question landed like a stone in still water ripples expanding outward. Claire had deliberately avoided looking that far ahead, focusing instead on the immediate goal of preventing Ash's capture. The possibility that he might choose continued association rather than returning fully to the wild presented complications she hadn't allowed herself to consider. "Then I figure out what that means," she replied finally. For both of us, the sound of distant rotors interrupted their conversation, the rhythmic thump of helicopter blades echoing across the valleys. Both rangers' tensed eyes scanning the horizon. The aircraft appeared as a dark speck against the morning sky following the main river valley that ran parallel to their position, still several miles to the east. "They're starting systematic grid searches," Sophia observed, tracking the helicopter's movement, working outward from the station in expanding circles. How long before they reached the basin, Claire was already mentally cataloging their supplies, identifying what could be quickly packed if they needed to move deeper into the wilderness. Sophia considered the search pattern. Today they'll focus on the southern quadrants, more accessible terrain, higher probability zones based on the direction we initially headed. The basin is low priority, difficult access not on any direct route to population centers. I'd say we have at least 4 hours before they sweep this area. Claire nodded, decision made. Then we rest today, recover our strength. Tomorrow we establish a more permanent position in the caves, something less visible from the air. They spent the day in careful preparation, organizing supplies, scouting the cave system, and creating contingency plans for various scenarios. Claire divided her attention between tactical considerations and Ash's care, monitoring his condition with medical precision, while allowing him the freedom to explore the immediate surroundings of the camp. By mid-afternoon, the stallion had ventured to the edge of the meadow, grazing cautiously while maintaining awareness of their position. He showed no inclination to stray beyond visual contact, returning periodically to the lean-to for rest. His behavior continued to defy conventional understanding of wild Mustangs, particularly those with his limited history of human interaction. As evening approached, Claire sat on the cabin porch cleaning the emergency pistol Sophia had brought from the station. The familiar ritual of disassembly, inspection, and reassembly grounded her hands, moving through the process with muscle memory cultivated over years of service. Sophia joined her radio scanner propped against the wall, monitoring the search communications. "They've expanded the search radius to 15 miles. Sophia reported, adjusting the frequency slightly, still focused south and east. "They're bringing in additional personnel tomorrow. Park Service rangers, county deputies." Claire reassembled the firing pin with practiced precision, Mercer's not giving up easily. "It's not just about the horse anymore," Sophia pointed out. "Now it's about a ranger going rogue, defying federal authority. You've become a symbol of something larger." "I don't want to be a symbol," Claire replied, sliding the magazine into place with a definitive click. "I just want to pay a debt." Movement near the meadow's edge caught her attention. Ash head, raised ears pricked toward the northern slope. His posture had changed from relaxed grazing to alert vigilance, muscles tensed beneath his dark coat. Claire followed his gaze, hand instinctively tightening on the reassembled pistol. A flash of movement among the trees resolved into shapes. 3 Mustangs emerging from the forest edge, approaching with cautious curiosity. A dun mare led the small band, flanked by a younger horse and a yearling colt. They paused at the boundary between forest and meadow, nostrils flaring to catch Ash's scent on the breeze. His herd, Claire whispered, lowering the gun, or part of it. Ash remained motionless, watching the approaching horses with intense focus. The mare stepped forward, crossing the invisible boundary into the meadow. She approached with delicate steps, head extended, ears flicking back and forth in equine communication. Ash nickered softly in response, the sound carrying across the quiet basin. The reunion unfolded with silent grace. The mare circling Ash, carefully inspecting his wound with gentle nudges. The younger horses maintaining respectful distance until the initial greeting completed. No human language could capture the complexity of their interaction, the invisible currents of herd dynamics reasserting themselves after separation. Claire watched from the porch, throat tight with an emotion she couldn't name. Something profound was happening. A circle completing itself, a wild creature returning to his kind, despite the transformative experiences that had briefly connected him to the human world. The sight carried both beauty and loss, intertwined so completely she couldn't separate them. He might go with them, Sophia said quietly, reading the mixture of emotions on Claire's face. Tonight. It's what we came here for, isn't it? His freedom to choose. Claire didn't answer immediately, watching as Ash exchanged breath with the mare, their muzzles nearly touching in equine greeting. Yes, she admitted finally. That was always the point. As darkness fell across the basin, the small herd remained at the meadow's edge, grazing together in the last light. Ash moved among them with growing ease, his injured side seemingly forgotten in the comfort of familiar company. Claire forced herself to turn away, focusing instead on securing their position for the night. She had known this moment would come, had fought for his right to make exactly this choice, yet the reality of it carved a hollow space beneath her ribs. Sophia took first watch, settling on the porch with the scanner and a thermal scope borrowed from the station's emergency gear. Claire retreated to the cabin interior, spreading her sleeping bag on the rough wooden floor. Exhaustion dragged at her limbs, the adrenaline of their escape finally draining away to leave bone-deep weariness in its wake. Sleep came in fitful bursts, dreams tangling with memories. The rope cutting into her ankles, the sun burning overhead, the moment of falling as the knot gave way. She woke fully just before midnight, awareness returning in the instant way of soldiers in field conditions. Something had changed in the atmosphere around the cabin. She rose silently, hand-finding the pistol by instinct. The cabin door stood partially open, silver moonlight spilling across the threshold. Sophia's silhouette was visible on the porch, motionless, attention fixed on something in the meadow. Claire moved to join her, steps soundless on the wooden planks. The basin lay transformed in moonlight, grasses silvered and shadows deepened to velvet black. Near the center of the meadow stood Ash alone, the small herd nowhere in sight. He faced the cabin directly, head high, mane lifting slightly in the night breeze. The stallion's posture held an unmistakable quality of decision, not the random positioning of an animal, but the deliberate stance of a being who had made a choice. He sent them away, Sophia whispered, voice hushed with wonder. The mare tried to lead him back to the trees, but he refused to follow. He chose to stay. Claire descended the porch steps, slowly moving into the moonlight, where Ash could clearly see her. The distance between them seemed to hold all the complexity of their impossible connection, wild and tamed animal and human freedom and obligation. She stopped at the meadow's edge, making no move to approach further, offering him the space to choose again, if he wished. Ash stood motionless for a long moment, dark eyes reflecting moonlight. Then with deliberate grace, he walked toward her across the silvered grass. His steps were steady, unhurried, carrying the dignity of a creature moving by choice rather than compulsion. He stopped before her close enough that his breath warmed the night air between them. Claire extended her hand, palm up, not grasping, only offering. You don't owe me this, she told him softly. You've repaid any debt 100 times over. The stallion regarded her with that unfathomable gaze, wisdom without words. Then he lowered his muzzle to her palm, breath warm against her skin, making his choice with unmistakable clarity. In that moment, standing in moonlight with a wild creature who had chosen against his nature, Claire felt something long frozen begin to thaw. The walls she'd built since Afghanistan, layers of isolation and duty and penance, couldn't withstand this inexplicable grace. A single tear traced down her cheek, the first she'd allowed herself since burying her team. From the porch, Sophia watched the tableau with quiet understanding. The scanner in her hand crackled suddenly to life, breaking the silence with operational chatter from the search teams. The noise seemed to come from another world entirely, one governed by protocols and jurisdictions, forms and regulations, a world that had no language for what was unfolding in the moonlit basin. "We'll figure something out," she said when Claire returned to the porch, Ash following a few paces behind. "Some way for him to remain free, but connected. There has to be a middle path." Claire nodded, certainty forming from the chaos of the past weeks. "There is. I've been thinking about it since that first night in the forest. Something that honors what he is without caging it." Morning broke clear and cold across the basin, frost silvering the meadow grasses. Claire stood at the cave entrance they'd prepared as their more secure position, watching the sun crest the eastern ridge. Ash grazed nearby, moving with increasing ease as his wound continued its remarkable healing. The scanner had remained quiet through the night, the search teams apparently focusing their efforts elsewhere. The reprieve wouldn't last. Eventually, the methodical grid pattern would bring them to the basin, but it had given Claire time to refine the plan taking shape in her mind. Sophia joined her at the cave entrance, offering a steaming cup of coffee. "You were up early, couldn't sleep." Claire accepted the cup gratefully. Too many thoughts colliding. Care to share any of them? Sophia leaned against the rock face-owned coffee, cradled between her palms. Claire's gaze returned to Ash, watching the fluid grace of his movements across the frosted meadow. "I've been thinking about what comes after this. After his wound heals and Mercer's search eventually winds down. What happens next?" And Sophia prompted gently. "What if there's a different approach?" Claire turned to face her fully. "Not capturing wild Mustangs for research, not leaving them entirely separate from human systems, but creating a partnership based on choice rather than dominance." Sophia's expression showed cautious interest. What kind of partnership? Claire outlined the vision that had been forming since that first impossible rescue. A specialized wilderness patrol unit utilizing Mustangs that chose association with humans. No breaking, no forced domestication, but a relationship built on mutual benefit and respect for the animal's agency. Horses that remained essentially wild, but worked alongside rangers in terrain where vehicles couldn't go and technology often failed. The Echo Mustang Recon Unit, she concluded, the name carrying personal significance she didn't elaborate on. A new approach to conservation patrol that honors what these animals are instead of trying to change them. Sophia considered this professional assessment warring with personal hope. The bureaucracy would fight it every step of the way. Liability concerns alone would give them hives. But they care about optics, Claire countered. And public opinion is already trending toward Ash after the photos from the station attack went viral. "Hero Mustang takes bullet to save Rangers" makes for compelling headlines. "You'd need institutional support," Sophia mused, thinking through the political landscape. "Someone with enough authority to shield the program during its early stages, and documented protocols to satisfy the safety requirements. We'd build it properly." Claire's determination hardened into certainty, something that could be replicated in other wilderness areas if successful. A model for a different kind of relationship between conservation authorities and the wild spaces they protect. The conversation paused as the scanner crackled to life, a helicopter repositioning to begin sweeps of the northern quadrant. Their time in the basin was growing short. Soon they would need to either move deeper into the wilderness or confront the approaching search teams. Sophia's expression shifted to one of decision. "If we're going to turn this from fugitive status to formal proposal, we need leverage. Something that makes Mercer and her department back down without losing face." Claire nodded, mind already calculating possibilities. "And we need allies. People with enough influence to get us a hearing instead of a court-martial." The seeds of a counter-strategy took root as they discussed options, transforming their defensive position into the beginnings of an offensive campaign. If they couldn't outrun federal authority indefinitely, perhaps they could reshape the narrative into something that served both Ash's freedom and the larger principles at stake. By midday, the distant thump of helicopter rotors signaled the search expanding into their vicinity. Claire and Sophia had relocated to the cave system position, secure and his supplies arranged for potential confrontation. Ash remained with them by choice, showing no inclination to flee despite the approaching disturbance. "We have maybe 2 hours before they reach the basin," Sophia estimated, tracking the helicopter's movement through breaks in the canopy. "We need to decide, continue evading or change tactics." Claire checked her satellite phone, confirming the message she'd sent earlier had been received. Senator Hansen's office acknowledged receipt. His environmental aide promised to brief him before his committee meeting this afternoon. Hansen's committee oversees Department of Interior Appropriations, Sophia noted. Good leverage if he's sympathetic. He was a wildlife management major before politics, Claire replied. And he's positioning himself as the conservation candidate for next year's gubernatorial race. Our situation offers him a perfect platform. Federal overreach versus wildlife protection. The optics work in his favor. The calculation was cold but necessary. In the world of bureaucratic battles, principles rarely triumphed without political advantage attached. If they could align their cause with the interests of someone with sufficient authority, they might transform their act of defiance into institutional change. The satellite phone chimed with an incoming message. Claire read it quickly, face revealing nothing, until she'd processed the full content Hansen's aide. The senator is interested in our situation. He's instructed Interior to suspend the search operation pending his personal review. Sophia's eyebrows rose. That's significant intervention. What's his angle? Claire handed her the phone to read the full message. He wants exclusive rights to announce the Echo Mustang program. Public unveiling at his conservation summit next month. We become the centerpiece of his environmental platform. Politics, Sophia's tone, carried equal parts disgust and pragmatism. But it might work. Does Mercer know yet? The answer came minutes later as the helicopter abruptly changed course rotors, fading as it headed back toward the station. The scanner confirmed the shift. All search teams recalled operations suspended by direct order from Washington. The bureaucratic machinery had responded to the pressure point with predictable self-preservation. Claire stepped from the cave entrance, watching the helicopter disappear beyond the ridgeline. Ash approached from where he'd been sheltering in the aspen's ears forward, with interest at the change in circumstances. She placed a hand on his shoulder, feeling the steady strength beneath her palm. It's not over, she told him quietly, but it's a start. The following days brought a flurry of remote negotiations. Satellite calls with Hansen's staff, draft proposals shuttled back and forth, legal frameworks constructed to protect both the Mustang's autonomy and the program's operational viability. Claire worked tirelessly, transforming her intuitive understanding of Ash into protocols that might extend to other Mustangs with similar potential. Sophia handled the political dimensions, leveraging her connections within the Forest Service to build internal support. The story of Ash's rescue and subsequent defense of the station had spread throughout the agency, creating a groundswell of interest in the innovative approach Claire proposed. A week after their flight to the basin, a small delegation arrived by horseback. Hansen's environmental director, a tribal representative from the Shoshone Council, and Dr. Martinez bringing fresh medical supplies and formal documentation from the senator's office. The meeting took place in the meadow with Ash present but unrestrained, his free movement around the humans, making the central point more eloquently than any words could. The senator is prepared to announce the pilot program next week, Hansen's representative explained, handing Claire a folder of official documents. Full funding for the initial phase with personnel and equipment allocations to establish operational viability. And the research request, Claire asked the crucial detail that had precipitated their flight. Withdrawn, the aide confirmed. The department has agreed to observational studies only, with no containment or removal from natural habitat. Any research must be conducted under protocols established by the program leadership, which the senator's office recommends. BU Ranger Dawson. Claire accepted the folder without opening it, attention shifting to Ash as he grazed peacefully nearby. And his status? Legally, what protections does he have? The tribal representative spoke for the first time, her voice carrying the weight of cultural authority. The Shoshone Council has designated him and any Mustangs that join your program as heritage animals. Under our agreement with the federal government that provides additional protections beyond standard wildlife regulations. The pieces were falling into place, political necessity aligning with ethical principle in one of those rare moments when the right action also became the politically advantageous one. Claire felt the tension of the past weeks begin to uncoil from her spine, not in complete release, but in transition from acute crisis to longer challenge. That evening, with the delegation departed and plans established for their official return to the station, Claire sat on a ridge overlooking the basin. Ash stood nearby, silhouetted against the sunset, his coat gleaming with health as his wound continued its remarkable healing. In the meadow below, the small band that had visited earlier had returned, grazing cautiously at the edge of the tree line. "I don't know if this will work," she told him honestly. "If we can create something that truly honors what you are while still allowing you to help us. But I promise we'll try." The stallion turned his head toward her eyes, reflecting the fading light. For a creature without human language, he communicated with remarkable clarity, not through anthropomorphic expression, but through the steadiness of his presence, the deliberate nature of his choices. He had chosen again and again to rescue, to return, to defend, to stay, each decision defying the expected behavior of his kind. Together, Claire thought, watching him against the deepening sky. Not owner and possession, not even human and domesticated animal, but something new. Something built on mutual recognition of the wild and valuable in each other. The stars emerged above the Tetons, brilliant in the clear mountain air. Tomorrow would bring the return to human systems, protocols and paperwork, justifications and jurisdictions. But tonight in this basin, something ancient and unspoken held sway. A covenant between species that transcended the artificial boundaries humans had constructed to separate themselves from the wild. Sophia approached along the ridge, steps quiet in deference to the moment, helicopters coming at dawn. Martinez says Ash is cleared for transport back to the station. The holding facility has been converted to the program headquarters per Hansen's authorization. Claire nodded, eyes still on the horizon. "Everything's changing. For the better," Sophia suggested, settling beside her on the rocky outcrop. "You've created something important here, Dawson. Something that might actually work." "He created it," Claire corrected, gaze shifting to Ash. "I'm just trying to honor it properly." The night deepened around them, wrapping the basin in velvet darkness, pierced by stars. Below, the wild Mustangs moved like shadows through the meadow, Ash among them yet distinct. A bridge between worlds that should never have connected yet somehow had. Claire watched until moonrise, allowing herself to believe just for this moment that some debts could be repaid after all, not through sacrifice, but through creation. The helicopter descended into Bridger Teton Station through morning mist rotors, churning the air into swirling patterns across the yard. Rangers gathered at a respectful distance, faces bearing the mixture of curiosity and reverence that had characterized interactions with Ash since his first impossible rescue. The past week's events had transformed the station's atmosphere, replacing the tense aftermath of Cole's betrayal with something approaching cautious hope. Claire stood at the makeshift landing zone, her stance military straight, despite the fatigue of the basin journey still evident in the shadows beneath her eyes. Beside her, Sophia maintained her own professional composure, the deputy chief's uniform freshly pressed for the occasion. Senator Hansen's advance team had arrived the previous day, transforming the station's modest conference room into a media staging area in preparation for the afternoon's announcement. The aircraft touched down with practiced precision, its government markings gleaming in the strengthening sunlight. The door slid open to reveal Senator Hansen himself, a tall man with weather-lined features and the confident bearing of someone accustomed to authority. Unlike many politicians, his outdoor experience showed in the ease with which he navigated the uneven ground, more comfortable in hiking boots than the expected wingtips. Claire had chosen to leave Ash at the converted paddock rather than subjecting him to the helicopter's arrival. The decision reflected the core philosophy she developed for the Echo program, the Mustang's comfort and choices taking precedence over human convenience or spectacle. Hansen noticed the stallion's absence, immediately eyes scanning the yard with the assessment of a lifelong outdoorsman. "I was hoping to meet our four-legged hero before the cameras arrived," disappointment briefly crossing his features. Claire remained unmoved. "He's not a photo opportunity, Senator. He's still healing from a gunshot wound taken defending this station." Hansen's expression shifted from political affability to something more genuine, respect edged with caution. "Point taken, Ranger Dawson. My advance team mentioned you were protective." "Not protective," Claire corrected. "Respectful. There's a difference." The distinction wasn't lost on Hansen, whose background in wildlife management had predated his political career. He nodded slightly, political calculation recalibrating behind his eyes. "Show me what you've established so far. I'd like to understand the program before I announce it to the world." They walked toward the converted facility in the eastern section of the compound, formerly used for equipment storage and temporary holding of injured wildlife. Claire had overseen its transformation during the 3 days since their return from the basin. Partitions removed to create open spaces, traditional stalls replaced with sheltered areas that allowed free movement, conventional paddock gates modified to permit passage while maintaining security from unauthorized access. Ash stood in the largest enclosure, head raised at their approach. His wound had continued its remarkable healing, the bandage now reduced to a small protective covering over the nearly closed injury. Unlike typical horses in captivity, he showed none of the repetitive movements or stress behaviors common to confined Mustangs. He approached the fence line with deliberate dignity, assessing Hansen with the same penetrating intelligence Claire had witnessed from their first encounter. The senator halted several paces back, genuine awe momentarily displacing political poise. I've worked with wild horses for 30 years. I've never seen a Mustang behave like this, especially one with his limited human contact. That's the point, Claire replied, watching the stallion's ears track their conversation with evident interest. He's not acting against his nature. He's expanding it to include us by choice. Hansen studied the facility with renewed attention, noting the design elements that emphasize freedom of movement and autonomous decision-making. And you believe other Mustangs might demonstrate similar capacity for partnership? Claire chose her words carefully, aware that the program's future hung on balancing optimism with realism. Not all, maybe not even many, but some, those with the right temperament and intelligence, might choose association over avoidance if the terms respect their essential nature. The senator processed this political instincts, measuring public reception against practical implementation. This won't be an easy sell to traditional wildlife management. They're accustomed to more controlled approaches. That's why it needs to be a partnership with the animals, not another domestication program. Claire countered, conviction threading through her voice. The moment we try to control the outcome is the moment we lose what makes this valuable. Hansen's gaze shifted between Claire and Ash, the political calculation in his expression giving way to something more authentic. The conservationist he'd been before entering politics. I think I understand now why my office has been flooded with calls supporting your initiative. You're not just proposing a new ranger program. You're suggesting a fundamental shift in how we interact with the wild. The distinction matters, Claire confirmed, watching Ash's measured movements along the fence line. Otherwise, we're just creating another cage with a more attractive name. Their conversation continued through the technical aspects of the proposal, funding requirements, operational protocols, legal frameworks necessary to protect both the Mustangs and the program's autonomy. Hansen absorbed the details with the efficiency of a seasoned politician, occasionally probing for weaknesses that might draw criticism from various constituencies. Claire met each challenge directly, her military background evident in the precision of her responses and her unflinching acknowledgement of potential difficulties. By the time they returned to the main building, Hansen's skepticism had transformed into cautious advocacy. My staff will need to refine some of the regulatory language, but the core concept is sound. More importantly, it's exactly the kind of innovative conservation approach my constituents have been demanding. Claire recognized the political calculation behind his support, but welcomed it nonetheless. Principle without power rarely survived the bureaucratic gauntlet. If Hansen's ambitions aligned with the program's success, both would benefit. The press conference unfolded on the station's front lawn, hastily erected podium framed by the spectacular backdrop of the Tetons. Local media had arrived in force, joined by environmental correspondents from several national outlets. Claire stood slightly behind the senator, uniform pressed and expression controlled, despite her discomfort with the attention. The official announcement proceeded with political precision, Hansen highlighting the program's innovative approach to conservation while emphasizing its fiscal responsibility and alignment with Western values of freedom and self-determination. What the Echo Mustang Recon Unit represents is not just a new tool for wilderness management. Hansen's practice cadence carried across the assembled journalists. It represents a new philosophy, one that recognizes the intelligence and agency of these magnificent animals while harnessing their natural abilities for the protection of our public lands. The questions that followed revealed the spectrum of reactions the program would face. Enthusiasm from environmental advocates, skepticism from traditional wildlife managers, concern from animal rights groups about potential exploitation. Hansen navigated the cross-currents with political dexterity, occasionally deferring technical questions to Claire, whose direct, unembellished responses provided a stark contrast to political polish. A reporter from a conservation magazine pressed on the program's most controversial aspect: how do you respond to critics who say you're simply creating a more palatable form of captivity for these wild animals? Claire stepped forward before Hansen could formulate a political response. If captivity is the absence of choice, then this program is its opposite. These Mustangs remain free to leave at any time. Our success depends entirely on their continued decision to partner with us. The moment we attempt to force their cooperation is the moment the program fails. Her unvarnished directness cut through the practiced theater of the press conference. Several journalists leaned forward, recognizing the authenticity behind her words. One photographer captured the moment. Claire's unflinching gaze, the mountains rising behind her, determination etched in every line of her posture. The image would later grace the cover of National Geographic's feature on the program, becoming its unofficial emblem. The formal announcement complete, Claire escaped the media circus to return to the paddock area. Ash greeted her at the fence line, ears forward with interest. She leaned against the rail, the tension of public performance draining from her shoulders. Politics makes strange allies, she told him quietly. But sometimes that's what it takes to protect what matters. The stallion's ear flicked in what she'd come to recognize as acknowledgement. His intelligence continued to defy conventional understanding, not in human terms, but in his evident comprehension of emotional states and complex situations. He demonstrated none of the agitation typical of wild Mustangs in proximity to human activity, his calm presence a testament to the trust they'd established. Sophia joined her as afternoon shadows lengthened across the yard. Hansen's entourage finally departed in a convoy of government vehicles. The deputy chief's expression mixed satisfaction with wariness. Hansen delivered on his promises. Full funding, expedited approval, official designation as program director. You've accomplished the impossible. Claire watched Ash move toward the open section of the paddock, his gait showing increasing strength as his wound continued healing. Not me, him. I just refuse to let them put him in a cage for it. You know, this is just the beginning, Sophia cautioned. The hard part comes next, proving it can work beyond this one extraordinary case. That reality had occupied Claire's thoughts since their return from the basin. Ash represented an anomaly, a wild Mustang whose intelligence and temperament enabled an unprecedented bond with humans. The program's viability depended on finding others with similar potential, establishing protocols that respected their autonomy while creating genuine partnership. I know, Claire acknowledged. But for today, let's call it a victory. The weeks that followed transformed the theoretical framework into operational reality. Claire divided her time between developing program protocols and working directly with Ash, whose recovery had progressed to permit limited field exercises. They began with short excursions into the surrounding forest, establishing communication patterns based on mutual understanding rather than traditional training methods. Unlike conventional equestrian approaches, Claire used no saddle, no bridle, no physical controls. Their connection relied entirely on Ash's choice to cooperate, her guidance offered through subtle body language and verbal cues he'd come to recognize. The absence of forced compliance created a relationship unlike anything documented in wildlife management literature. Not human dominance over animal, but genuine collaboration between distinct intelligences. Dr. Martinez monitored Ash's physical recovery while developing veterinary protocols specific to the program's unique approach. His initial skepticism had given way to professional fascination, particularly regarding the stallion's accelerated healing rate and apparent psychological resilience. I've treated hundreds of horses with similar injuries, he noted one evening, reviewing the latest tissue scans. The typical recovery timeline is 3 times longer than what we're seeing. It's as if his determination is physically affecting his healing process. Claire had observed the same phenomenon since their first encounter. Ash's ability to push beyond normal equine limitations when circumstances demanded it. The quality seemed connected to his extraordinary intelligence, his comprehension of purpose, translating into physical capability that defied conventional understanding. As Ash's strength returned, Claire began incorporating him into actual ranger duties. First simple perimeter checks, then more complex monitoring of remote trail systems inaccessible to vehicles. His natural awareness of forest conditions proved invaluable attention to environmental changes far exceeding human perception. He detected subtle shifts in wildlife movement patterns, identified unstable terrain before visible signs appeared, and navigated the complex mountain topography with instinctive precision. Sophia coordinated with station personnel to document these capabilities, building the empirical case for the program's operational value. The evidence accumulated rapidly. Patrol efficiency increased by 40% in areas where Ash participated. Environmental anomalies detected earlier, emergency response times shortened in remote sectors. The practical benefits extended beyond theoretical conservation philosophy, providing tangible metrics that would satisfy even skeptical bureaucrats. 6 weeks after the program's announcement, Claire received notification of the formal field evaluation that would determine its future. A joint assessment team from the Department of Interior and Forest Service would observe 3 days of operations, measuring the program against established wilderness management standards. The evaluation would focus not only on operational effectiveness, but also on animal welfare concerns and sustainability projections. Sophia helped prepare the necessary documentation experience, with bureaucratic requirements proving invaluable. This will be as much about paperwork as performance. They'll be looking for any excuse to classify this as experimental rather than operational. Claire understood the implications. Experimental status would limit expansion and maintain constant vulnerability to budget cuts or policy changes. Operational classification would provide institutional protection and open pathways for implementation in other wilderness areas. The evaluation team arrived on a clear autumn morning, frost silvering the grass around the landing pad as their helicopter settled onto the tarmac. Claire observed their disembarkation from the paddock area, assessing each member's body language and interaction patterns. The team leader, Dr. Eleanor Vasquez, Wildlife Management Director for the mountain region, carried herself with the careful neutrality of an experienced evaluator. The others represented various technical specialties: veterinary science, wilderness operations, resource management, legal compliance. Claire had chosen to conduct the evaluation's first phase in the basin where they'd taken refuge months earlier. The location offered both practical advantages for demonstration and symbolic resonance with the program's origins. Ash seemed to recognize their destination as they approached the trailhead, his stride lengthening with evident anticipation as familiar territory came into view. The evaluation team followed on conventional mounts, the contrast between their traditional equestrian equipment and Claire's equipment-free approach, creating a visual representation of the philosophical difference under assessment. Dr. Vasquez observed with professional attention, noting the communication patterns between Ranger and Mustang without offering immediate judgment. As they crested the final ridge overlooking the basin, Claire halted to allow the team a comprehensive view of the alpine meadow spread below. Autumn had transformed the landscape since their last visit. Aspen groves flaming gold against the evergreen backdrop, meadow grasses cured to amber waves that rippled in the mountain breeze. The conservation structures remain visible near the western edge, now supplemented by minimal monitoring equipment installed for the program. This serves as our primary field station for the high country sector, Claire explained, indicating the modest infrastructure. Minimal footprint positioned to avoid disrupting wildlife corridors or grazing areas. Dr. Vasquez surveyed the setup with professional assessment and what determines where Ash goes. Standard patrol routes or his discretion. Claire recognized the question's significance, whether the program truly respected the Mustang's autonomy or merely created the illusion of choice within predetermined constraints. Both, but his discretion takes precedence. His understanding of the terrain and wildlife patterns exceeds our mapping and capabilities. We provide direction. He determines the optimal path. To demonstrate, Claire indicated a distant ridgeline where recent geological surveys had identified potential instability. We need to check the north face for signs of increased erosion after last week's rainfall. Standard procedure would take us along the eastern approach. Without traditional commands, she simply oriented her body toward the objective, communicating intent through subtle shifts in posture and a few quiet words of north face assessment. Your choice. Ash considered the terrain with evident calculation, head raised to scan the various possible routes. Then, rather than following the expected eastern trail, he chose a game path that curved through the western aspen grove, a route absent from official maps but offering more stable footing and better visibility of the target area. The evaluation team followed expressions ranging from skepticism to cautious interest as they navigated the unmarked trail. Dr. Vasquez maintained professional reserve, though Claire noted her attention tracking the precision of Ash's route selection, particularly when the path revealed advantageous features invisible from their starting position. The demonstration continued through various operational scenarios, locating a simulated lost hiker, identifying water contamination at a remote spring, assessing trail damage following seasonal flooding. In each case, Ash's performance exceeded conventional methods, his natural awareness of environmental conditions translating into operational advantages that even skeptical team members acknowledged in their field notes. The evaluation's second day focused on more challenging aspects: emergency response simulations, adverse weather operations, and interaction with wildlife. Claire had anticipated particular scrutiny of Ash's behavior around other animals, given concerns that a Mustang's natural instincts might compromise ranger operations in sensitive wildlife situations. The test came unexpectedly when they encountered a black bear and cubs along a narrow ravine, the mother instantly alert to their presence. The evaluation team's horses reacted with predictable alarm, ears flattened, bodies tensing, several backing nervously despite their riders' control attempts. Ash, by contrast, assessed the situation with remarkable composure, positioning himself between Claire and the bears without displaying aggression or fear. The mother bear huffed a warning, rising briefly on hind legs to better identify the intruders. Claire remained still, allowing Ash to manage their positioning. The stallion held his ground with quiet confidence, communicating neither threat nor weakness to the territorial mother. After a tense moment that stretched the evaluation team's nerves to breaking, the bear dropped to all fours and guided her cubs into the underbrush, satisfied that her warning had been acknowledged. Only when the bears had disappeared did Ash relax his vigilant posture, turning to check Claire's condition with evident concern. The interaction had lasted less than 2 minutes, but demonstrated a level of situational intelligence that transcended training or conditioning. No conventional mount would have responded with such nuanced understanding of interspecies dynamics. Dr. Vasquez made extensive notes, professional reserve, briefly overwhelmed by scientific curiosity. Has he demonstrated similar awareness with other predator species? Claire confirmed. Instances with mountain lions and wolves, each characterized by the same measured assessment rather than instinctive flight response. We believe it connects to his role in his natural herd, protection rather than individual survival, appearing to drive his decision-making in threat situations. The evaluation's final day addressed the program's most controversial aspect: the identification and incorporation of additional Mustangs with similar potential. The team observed as Claire demonstrated the assessment protocols developed during the previous months using Ash's herd as the test case. Unlike traditional Mustang management programs that focused on capturing and gentling wild horses, the Echo approach emphasized observation and invitation without compulsion. Claire had established monitoring stations throughout the herd's range, documenting individual behaviors and identifying those showing particular intelligence, curiosity toward humans, and leadership qualities within the herd structure. We're not looking to recruit large numbers, she explained, as they observed the herd from a respectful distance. Quality over quantity. Each Mustang must demonstrate natural inclination toward human interaction before we even consider approaching. Dr. Vasquez watched a young mare who had separated slightly from the main group, showing cautious interest in their presence. And if one initially engages but later chooses to return fully to the wild, then they return. Claire's response carried absolute certainty. Freedom of choice remains non-negotiable. We're building relationships, not ownership. The mare approached closer, drawn by curiosity rather than need. Claire demonstrated the initial contact protocol, remaining still, attention directed elsewhere, creating space for the Mustang to investigate without pressure. The young horse circled cautiously, nostrils flaring to capture their scent, ears flicking as she processed new information. Ash remained nearby, his presence seeming to reassure the mare that these humans represented no threat. His role in the introduction process had proven crucial during previous attempts, his evident trust in Claire serving as social proof for other Mustangs considering interaction. This mare has visited our observation post 3 times in the past month, Claire noted quietly as the horse continued her assessment. She shows the curiosity pattern we've identified as promising, but final determination would require several more voluntary interactions before we'd consider her a candidate. Dr. Vasquez made detailed notes, professional skepticism warring with evident fascination. The selection criteria seems sound, but I'm concerned about reproducibility. Ash may represent a statistical anomaly rather than an indicator of broader potential. Claire acknowledged the legitimate concern. That's why expansion will proceed gradually with extensive documentation of each case. We're not looking to revolutionize wildlife management overnight. We're establishing proof of concept for an alternative approach that might apply to a subset of Mustangs with particular characteristics. The evaluation concluded with a formal debriefing at the station team members, presenting preliminary findings while reserving final judgment for their official report. Dr. Vasquez summarized with careful neutrality, the operational benefits are undeniable in strictly practical terms. The questions remaining primarily concern scalability, long-term sustainability, and whether sufficient suitable candidates exist to justify program expansion. Claire recognized the measured approval behind the scientific caution, not enthusiasm but acknowledgement of demonstrated value. The program had cleared its first major hurdle, moving from theoretical concept to proven capability under formal assessment. The official classification arrived 2 weeks later. Operational status granted with monitored expansion authorization for 3 additional wilderness areas. The designation provided institutional protection beyond Senator Hansen's political patronage, embedding the eco approach within formal conservation infrastructure rather than remaining dependent on individual advocacy. Sophia delivered the notification personally, finding Claire at the Basin Observation Post, where she'd established a secondary operating base. The station had proven too confining for extended periods, its bureaucratic atmosphere, and constant interruptions interfering with the program's development. The basin offered both practical advantages and symbolic continuity, the place where Claire and Ash had first chosen partnership over separate paths. It's official, Sophia handed over the sealed authorization document. Full operational status, guaranteed funding for 5 years expansion, authorization for selected wilderness areas in Wyoming, Montana, and Idaho. Claire accepted the document without opening it, the formal confirmation less significant than the work already underway. They approved all 3 expansion sites with monitoring requirements. But yes, you've convinced them there's something here worth pursuing beyond a single exceptional case. Ash grazed nearby autumn sunlight, gilding his coat as he moved through the cured meadow grasses. His wound had healed completely, only a slight dimple in the muscle marking where the bullet had torn through. He had returned to full strength weeks earlier, his endurance and agility seemingly enhanced rather than diminished by the experience. 2 other Mustangs had begun the assessment process. The curious mare from the evaluation demonstration and a younger stallion from a neighboring herd who had shown similar interest in human interaction. Both remained fully wild, their engagement with the program entirely on their terms, approaching observation points when curiosity overcame caution. We're going to need more rangers, Claire noted, considering the logistical requirements of expansion. People with the right temperament for this approach. Sophia smiled slightly. Already ahead of you, we've received transfer requests from 38 rangers across the western regions since the evaluation report circulated internally. Apparently, quite a few of them have been waiting for an opportunity like this. The news surprised Claire, who had anticipated resistance rather than enthusiasm from traditional rangers. Her own isolation had perhaps blinded her to others who shared her perspective on wilderness management. Those who viewed conservation as partnership rather than control, who recognized the intelligence and agency of the wild rather than seeing it merely as a resource to be managed. The conversation turned to implementation details, facility requirements, personnel, selection criteria, training protocols for the expanded program. Sophia had embraced her role as administrative architect, transforming Claire's field-based insights into sustainable institutional structures that could withstand bureaucratic challenges and leadership changes. As they discussed expansion timelines, Claire noticed a shift in Ash's attention. Head raised, ears forward, focus directed toward the northern ridge. He moved with sudden purpose toward the tree line, pace deliberate rather than alarmed. Claire recognized the behavior pattern from previous encounters, not danger detection, but recognition of approaching wildlife, specifically the other Mustangs. A small group emerged from the trees. Three horses moving with the characteristic alertness of wild Mustangs in unfamiliar territory. Claire recognized the lead mare from Ash's original herd, accompanied by two younger horses who had shown interest in the observation posts. They paused at the meadow's edge, assessing the human presence with cautious curiosity. Ash approached them with measured steps, positioning himself as intermediary between the wild group and the rangers. The communication between them occurred in subtle shifts of posture, ear positions, and soft vocalizations inaudible to human ears. Claire had witnessed this social mediation before Ash's unique position as bridge between worlds, enabling introductions that would otherwise prove impossible. Sophia watched with quiet amazement as the wild horses gradually relaxed the lead mare, eventually approaching within 20 yards of their position. I've worked with wilderness programs for 15 years. I've never seen anything like this. It's not training. Claire emphasized, careful to remain still as the Mustangs adjusted to their presence. It's relationship. They recognize that Ash has chosen association without losing his essential nature. That creates possibilities their instincts wouldn't normally allow. The interaction continued for nearly an hour, the wild Mustangs gradually decreasing their distance until the lead mare actually accepted an apple from Sophia's outstretched hand, not from hunger, but from deliberate choice to engage. The moment represented exactly the approach Claire had envisioned. Voluntary interaction initiated by the Mustangs themselves without capture or coercion. As the wild group eventually departed, disappearing back into the tree line with unhurried dignity, Sophia's expression held newfound conviction. This is going to work, isn't it? Not just with Ash, but as a genuine program. Claire watched Ash return to their position, his movements carrying the satisfaction of successful social facilitation. It already is working. We just need to get out of our own way and let it happen. The winter months brought new challenges as the program entered its first expansion phase. Heavy snowfall isolated the higher elevations, forcing operations to concentrate in the foothills and valley systems. Claire established a rotation between the main station and field outposts, balancing administrative requirements with the hands-on development work that remained the program's heart. The first expansion team completed initial training just before the winter solstice. 4 rangers selected from the transfer applicants, each demonstrating the particular combination of patience, intuition, and ego-free approach the program required. Claire had personally conducted the final assessments, looking beyond technical qualifications to the more intangible qualities necessary for genuine partnership with wild Mustangs. Unlike conventional ranger training that emphasized human authority and control, the ECHO program required participants to unlearn traditional approaches. Success depended on relinquishing the illusion of dominance, recognizing that the Mustangs' cooperation must be earned through mutual respect rather than imposed through human systems. The most promising candidate, Ranger Michael Blackfeather from the Nez Perce Reservation in Idaho, demonstrated natural affinity for the program's philosophy. His cultural background had instilled a perspective on human-animal relationships that aligned perfectly with Claire's approach, viewing interaction as conversation rather than command. On the winter solstice, Claire led the team to a sheltered valley where several Mustangs from the assessment program had established their winter range. The shortest day of the year held traditional significance for new beginnings, the turning point from increasing darkness to returning light, symbolic of the program's transformative goals. The team established position at the valley's edge, settling into the patient observation that characterized the ECHO approach. Hours passed in the crystalline winter silence. Occasional communications kept to essential information rather than unnecessary chatter. Claire had emphasized the importance of energy and intention when working with the Mustangs, their acute sensitivity to emotional states making human self-awareness a crucial component of successful interaction. Near midday, movement at the valley's northern end revealed a small band of Mustangs emerging from the forest. 3 mares and a young stallion moving with the heightened awareness of wild creatures in open terrain. Ash, who had accompanied the team, raised his head with evident recognition, a soft nickering sound carrying across the snow-covered ground. The wild horses paused, attention shifting to the mixed group of humans and domesticated mounts positioned at the valley's edge. The lead mare, a dun with distinctive facial markings, demonstrated particular interest, separating slightly from her companions to better assess the situation. Claire recognized her as one of the individuals who had shown repeated voluntary interaction at observation sites throughout the autumn months. Now, without any prompting, she allowed Ash to approach their greeting, consisting of exchanged breath and delicate muzzle touches. The connection established, Ash turned back toward the ranger team, the mare following at a distance that balanced curiosity against caution. Claire signaled the trainees to maintain absolute stillness as the wild horse approached, her movements deliberate but unafraid. The mare circled their position, assessing each human with evident intelligence before focusing on Ranger Blackfeather, whose composed presence seemed to draw her particular interest. The moment crystallized the program's essence, a wild creature choosing interaction without compulsion, initiating relationship on her own terms. Blackfeather maintained perfect stillness, eyes lowered in respect for her autonomy, breathing steady despite the extraordinary nature of the encounter. The mare approached to within arm's length, nostrils flaring to capture his scent, ears forward with curiosity, rather than the flattened wariness typical of wild Mustangs near humans. For several heartbeats, they remained in that tableau, wild and civilized, separated by millennia of evolutionary divergence, yet connected by something more fundamental than species boundaries. Then, with the same deliberate grace that had characterized her approach, the mare retreated to rejoin her herd, departure unhurried and unforced. The encounter had lasted less than 5 minutes, but represented months of patient groundwork. Observation without interference, respect for natural behavior patterns, creation of opportunities for voluntary engagement. That's how it begins, Claire told the team as they watched the Mustangs return to their grazing. Not with ropes or traps, but with invitation and choice. Blackfeather's expression held quiet wonder beneath professional composure. She chose me, didn't she? Out of everyone here, she specifically approached me. Claire nodded, recognizing the significance. The Mustangs select their partners as much as we select them. That's what makes this different from traditional programs. The relationship has to be mutual from the very beginning. The winter training continued through January, alternating field experience with theoretical instruction. Claire emphasized the balance between structure and flexibility, providing enough operational framework to satisfy institutional requirements while preserving the adaptive responsiveness that gave the program its unique character. Each trainee developed individual approaches within the core philosophy, their different backgrounds and personalities, creating variations that ultimately strengthened the program. Blackfeather's intuitive understanding complemented Ranger Chen's methodical documentation, while Ranger Wilkinson's extensive wilderness medicine background added valuable emergency response capabilities. By early February, 3 Mustangs had progressed to regular voluntary interaction, each showing particular affinity for specific trainees. The matching process occurred naturally without formal assignment or direction, relationships forming through repeated encounters and demonstrated trust. Claire documented each development with scientific precision, building the empirical foundation that would support program expansion beyond the initial test sites. The breakthrough came during a late February blizzard that swept across the Tetons with unexpected ferocity. A group of backcountry skiers, caught by the storm's rapid intensification, activated an emergency beacon from a remote drainage 15 miles from the nearest vehicle access point. Conventional search and rescue operations faced impossible conditions. Visibility near zero, temperatures plummeting, snow accumulation already exceeding 2 feet in exposed areas. Claire received the emergency notification at the Basin Outpost, where she'd been conducting assessment work with Blackfeather and 2 of the program Mustangs. The situation's urgency left no time for debate or conventional approval channels. If the stranded skiers were to survive the night, they needed immediate assistance beyond what traditional methods could provide. We're the only viable option, she informed Sophia via satellite phone, already preparing emergency medical supplies. Mustangs can navigate in conditions that would ground helicopters and stop snowmobiles. We can reach them when nothing else can. Sophia's concern transmitted clearly, despite the connection's static. You're talking about taking untested Mustangs into a Category 5 blizzard for an emergency extraction. That's beyond anything we've trained for. Claire's decision had already solidified. This is exactly what the program was created for, accessing the inaccessible when lives depend on it. Ash and I will take point. Blackfeather and Nova will follow with medical supplies. Nova, the dun mare who had shown such interest in Blackfeather during the solstice encounter, had progressed faster than any Mustang since Ash, her intelligence and courage matching her curiosity. Though still technically in assessment phase rather than formal operational status, her capabilities had repeatedly demonstrated readiness for fieldwork. The satellite connection crackled with Sophia's reluctant authorization. Understood. I'll coordinate with emergency services. But Claire, this isn't just about the stranded skiers. This mission becomes the program's defining moment for better or worse. Claire acknowledged the truth in Sophia's warning. Success would establish the ECHO program's unique value beyond theoretical benefits. Failure would provide ammunition to critics who viewed the entire approach as impractical idealism. The stakes transcended the immediate emergency, extending to the program's very survival. The rescue team departed into deteriorating conditions. Visibility reduced to mere yards, as wind-driven snow created a disorienting white curtain across the landscape. Conventional navigation tools proved useless in the whiteout conditions, GPS signals intermittently lost among the steep terrain and atmospheric interference. Claire relied entirely on Ash's natural navigational abilities, the stallion moving with unwavering confidence despite the environmental challenges. Behind them, Blackfeather and Nova maintained close formation, the mare demonstrating remarkable composure for a Mustang still transitioning from fully wild status. The Mustang's innate weather sense proved invaluable as they adjusted their route to avoid dangerous accumulation zones and potential avalanche paths. Where human judgment might have selected more direct approaches, Ash consistently chose safer alternatives. His understanding of snow conditions and terrain stability far exceeding technical assessment tools. 3 hours into the journey, conditions deteriorated beyond even pessimistic forecasts. Wind speeds approached 70 miles per hour, creating ground blizzard conditions that obscured all visual landmarks. Temperature dropped to 15 below zero wind chill, pushing effective temperature into life-threatening ranges. The emergency beacon's signal placed the stranded skiers in a drainage known locally as Widowmaker Gulch, a narrow ravine prone to dangerous snow accumulation during winter storms. As they approached the final ridge separating them from the gulch, Claire detected the first warning signs of avalanche conditions. Subtle shifts in the snowpack's consistency, minute vibrations beneath the surface layers, changes in the storm's acoustic properties as it interacted with unstable slopes. Ash sensed the danger simultaneously, his stride shortening as he reassessed their approach. Instead of crossing the ridge at its lowest point, as conventional training would dictate, he diverted to a seemingly more exposed shoulder where wind had scoured the snow to a more stable depth. The detour added distance but avoided the loading zone where avalanche danger peaked. The decision saved their lives. As they traversed the shoulder, a massive slide released on their originally planned route, thousands of tons of snow thundering into the basin below. The earth-shaking rumble penetrated even the storm's howling voice vibrations traveling through the ground beneath them. They reached the stranded skiers just before full darkness. 3 men huddled in a makeshift snow cave, hypothermia already advancing despite their wilderness experience. Claire's medical training and the supplies they'd carried allowed for immediate treatment, stabilizing the most critical patient while preparing all 3 for transport. The return journey presented even greater challenges, nightfall compounding the storm's dangers with absolute darkness. The injured skiers required careful handling, their compromised condition making conventional evacuation impossible. Claire improvised emergency transport arrangements, utilizing specialized equipment to distribute weight across both Mustangs without compromising their movement capabilities. Ash led the return procession with the most severely injured skier secured against Claire. The stallion's pace calibrated to maximize stability while maintaining essential progress through the worsening conditions. Behind them, Blackfeather and Nova carried the remaining skiers, the mare demonstrating extraordinary composure despite the unfamiliar burden and chaotic environment. Navigation relied entirely on the Mustang's natural abilities, human senses overwhelmed by the combination of darkness and driving snow. Claire maintained contact through touch and voice, her connection with Ash transcending conventional communication as they fought their way through the storm's fury. The journey stretched through the longest hours of the night, progress measured in yards rather than miles, as conditions deteriorated toward the storm's peak intensity. The lead skier's condition worsened, despite field treatment, core temperature dropping dangerously as exposure and injury combined to overwhelm his body's remaining resources. Dawn broke with grudging reluctance, gray light barely penetrating the storm's continuing assault. They had reached the lower foothills, though still miles from the nearest road access. The lead skier had slipped into unconsciousness, vital signs weakening despite Claire's continuous treatment efforts. The satellite phone crackled with an incoming transmission, Sophia coordinating a rendezvous with ground emergency services who had fought their way up the valley road with specialized snow equipment. The extraction point lay 2 miles ahead across a series of drainages that conventional vehicles couldn't navigate even in optimal conditions. Ash sensed the renewed urgency, his pace increasing without prompting as they pushed toward the rendezvous coordinates. Nova matched his determination, the two Mustangs breaking trail through chest-deep drifts where no human or conventional mount could have maintained forward progress. They reached the extraction point as emergency flares colored the driving snow with surreal crimson light. Medical teams rushed forward to transfer the injured skiers to heated transport expressions, shifting from professional focus to undisguised amazement as they registered the rescue party's composition. The lead paramedic couldn't contain his disbelief as they loaded the critical patient into the medical transport. "You brought them out through this storm on wild horses." "That's impossible." Claire's exhausted features showed no triumph, only the grim satisfaction of duty completed. "Apparently not." The rescue's aftermath transformed the ECHO program's status within both agency hierarchy and public perception. News coverage highlighted the operation's unprecedented success under conditions that had defeated conventional methods. Footage of the Mustangs returning from the blizzard, creating an indelible image of partnership between human and wild. Senator Hansen leveraged the moment with political precision, securing additional funding and expanded operational authorization during appropriations hearings where the rescue featured prominently in testimony. Critics found their objections undermined by empirical results, lives saved when no alternatives existed. Claire received the public attention with characteristic reserve, deflecting personal recognition toward the program's underlying philosophy. In official debriefings and press statements, she emphasized the Mustang's role rather than human direction. "We didn't conquer the mountain or bend nature to our will. We partnered with creatures who already understand the wilderness in ways we never will." Spring arrived with renewed purpose as the program entered its next expansion phase. The successful winter operations had validated the core approach, providing operational data to support implementation across additional wilderness areas. 3 more ranger teams completed training, each paired with Mustangs who had progressed through the assessment process to operational readiness. On the anniversary of Ash's bullet wound healing, Claire led a small ceremony at the Basin outpost, not for public consumption, but as private acknowledgement of the journey's significance. The team gathered in the meadow where their partnership had first solidified, early wildflowers beginning to dot the greening landscape as winter's grip finally relaxed. Claire had prepared a simple bronze plaque for installation at the observation post, its text deliberately sparse: "Echo Mustang Program, founded on choice, not capture." The sentiment captured the philosophy that had guided them from desperate flight to institutional program, the fundamental respect for autonomy that distinguished their approach from conventional wildlife management. As the team dispersed to their various assignments, Claire remained behind with Ash watching afternoon light gild the basin where everything had changed. The stallion stood beside her with the quiet confidence that had characterized him from their first encounter, his presence neither demanding nor dependent, but simply alongside. "1 year ago we ran from them," she told him, hand resting lightly on his shoulder where both scars had faded to silver lines against his dark coat. "Now they're following us." The observation carried no arrogance, only acknowledgement of the distance traveled from desperate escape to program leadership. The transformation extended beyond professional achievement to personal healing. The weight of Afghanistan gradually lightened by purpose discovered in unexpected partnership. Ash turned his head to regard her dark eyes, reflecting the same intelligence and choice that had drawn him to a ranger, suspended from a tree, dying in wilderness isolation. His decision then had altered both their paths, creating possibility where none had existed before. "We keep watch," Claire told him softly, echoing the commitment she'd made during their darkest moments. Together, the stallion's ear flicked in acknowledgement, attention shifting briefly to the ridgeline where several wild Mustangs had appeared. Curious observers from neighboring herds drawn by the successful examples of those who had chosen partnership without sacrificing freedom. Their presence represented the program's future, not mass recruitment, but selective connection with those rare individuals whose nature allowed for bridging the ancient divide between wild and civilized. As evening shadows lengthened across the basin, Claire and Ash departed for their next assignment, a boundary assessment in the northwestern quadrant where unusual wildlife movement patterns had been reported. They moved with a synchronized rhythm developed through countless miles of shared territory, neither leading nor following, but traveling alongside. The distinction between ranger and mount dissolved into true partnership. Behind them, the new bronze plaque caught the day's last light, its simple declaration standing as testament to a revolution begun not through human dominance but through recognition of intelligence beyond human boundaries. The ECHO program had transformed wilderness management not by imposing new control systems, but by acknowledging what had always existed, the possibility of connection across species boundaries when approached with respect rather than domination. Together, they crested the ridge silhouettes merging against the darkening sky, Ranger and Mustang, human and wild, separate yet united in purpose. The forest received them as it always had, neither hostile nor welcoming, but simply present in its ancient rhythms. Among those rhythms now moved something new yet paradoxically ancient, partnership freely chosen between beings who had recognized in each other something worthy of trust.